Que aconteceu?
Acho que parou a vinheta. Vamos reiniciar. DTI, já
No ar
estamos
já tá.
aqui.
Ah,
Tá. Por favor, coloca a vinheta novamente, que ela não passou até o fim.
tá.
Tá sem áudio.
Tem áudio.
Agora sim, muito bom dia. É um prazer imenso darmos início aqui ao sexto Congresso de Inteligência Artificial da PUC São Paulo, que é promovido pela Faculdade de Ciências Exatas e Tecnologia e pelo Programa de Pós-Graduação em Tecnologias da Inteligência e Design Digital, TID da PUC São Paulo. E esse ano, né, pelo segundo consecutivo, em parceria com a PUC Campinas, e o primeiro com a parceria da PUC Rio, o que nos deixa muito felizes pela grandeza do evento. Eu sou a Karen Sapienza, sou doutoranda no TID e eu tenho o prazer de acompanhar é, o congresso, né, vocês, durante esses 2 dias de evento, junto com uma equipe maravilhosa. Então, mais uma vez, a gente reafirma o nosso propósito de incentivar o desenvolvimento de projetos científico-acadêmicos que exploram esse campo da inteligência artificial, as suas tecnologias, aplicações e, sobretudo, as implicações sociais, éticas e humanas da IA. Então, à frente da realização desse congresso, a gente tem a professora Dora Kaufmann, que é pesquisadora, pós-doutora em impactos éticos e sociais da IA, é docente do TID e referência nacional no tema, e o professor Daniel Couto Gatti, que é doutor em educação matemática e diretor da Faculdade de Ciências Exatas e Tecnologia da PUC São Paulo, a quem convido para fazer a abertura oficial no nosso sexto Congresso de Inteligência Artificial. Bem-vindos, professores Dora e Daniel.
Bom, muito obrigada, Karen. O Congresso deve muito a você, que sempre coordena com primor a organização dessa equipe também maravilhosa, que eu agradeço. E é muita, imensa alegria nós estarmos no sexto Congresso, né? O país opera muito no curto prazo, então 6 anos seguidos a realização de um evento é um feito. Agradecemos imensamente também ao Google, que há 6 anos, desde a primeira edição, está conosco e viabiliza, com a generosa contribuição, as bolsas, que premiam os melhores trabalhos escolhidos pela comissão científica. Então, isso também é mais um incentivo, né, ao desenvolvimento de projetos, à participação. Esse ano tivemos submissões de projetos de pesquisa recorde, em números recorde. Todo ano nós estamos aumentando, o que é natural, porque a comunidade passa a conhecer melhor o Congresso e também porque a inteligência artificial, nos últimos 3 anos, é um dos grandes temas tratados mundialmente. mais uma vez, também uma satisfação enorme estar junto com o professor Daniel, meu parceiro, desde o primeiro também. Todo ano estamos firmes, já vamos começar a organizar o próximo. Então, eu queria chamar, por favor, para participar da abertura, também muito obrigada pela reitoria, a nova reitoria, e a professora vice-reitora, a professora Carla. Bom dia, professora Carla. Queria convidar também o professor Antônio Valverde, que já está conosco. Muito obrigada pela participação, pela presença, por ambos estarem prestigiando o nosso evento, que nos dá muita alegria. Queria convidar o professor Davi, que é o coordenador o novo, mais ou menos novo, mas mais recente, coordenador do TID, do nosso programa de pós-graduação, que é ligado à universidade. E é isso. Então, se o professor Daniel quiser falar alguma coisa, por favor, e a gente passaria a palavra para dar as boas-vindas à professora Carla.
Bom, vou falar rapidamente, a gente já passa para a professora Carla. Não, é enorme satisfação de estar aqui com a Dora, com a Karen, com esse time sensacional, organizando esse congresso, que eu acho que a gente o ano passado ampliou para 14 GTs, né? Então são muitos grupos de trabalhos onde a IA hoje, né, quando a gente começou há 6 anos atrás, a IA ainda estava só em machine learning, deep learning, de repente teve a evolução da IA generativa aí, que agora não se fala em outras coisas que não inteligência artificial, na educação muito intensa, nas empresas muito intensa, na automação muito intensa. A questão de vai tirar emprego das pessoas ou não, como que é a ética da inteligência artificial, e é muito interessante a gente falar sempre disso. E o que está por trás de tudo isso, dentro dessa tecnologia, que é uma tecnologia computacional intensa, tem as redes de computadores, tem as máquinas que ganharam um poder de processamento muito grande com as GPUs, né, que a gente diz. Então, e tudo isso está dentro da Universidade da PUC de São Paulo, onde nós começamos com as nossas co-irmãs, PUC do Rio, PUC Campinas, e muito intenso, porque eu brinco com o pessoal da reitoria, sempre que a gente entra nas reuniões lá, o pessoal da reitoria sempre fala PUC é humanas, né? E eu fico lá quietinho com a tecnologia, né? Então é muito legal. Antigamente eu falava, olha, eu vou cortar a internet de vocês. Aí eles falavam, então agora você pode participar da conversa, vem, né? Agora a gente fala assim, ó, nós vamos tirar as IAs aí, né? Então, não. Então, é muito rico sempre a gente ter a tecnologia junto, né? Estamos aqui fortalecendo a nossa faculdade, o nosso programa também, muito importante. E com todas essas pesquisas, né? Foram 54 trabalhos esse ano, assim, um recorde, uma intensidade, muitos trabalhos, com uma riqueza gigantesca. Então, vamos aproveitar ao máximo e quero dar boas-vindas a todos. E aí Dora, já passo direto para a professora Carla. Isso, então, professora Carla, nossa vice-reitora, primeira vez que nós temos uma participação intensa da reitoria com a gente. Professora Carla, tem aí a palavra. Muito obrigado.
Bom, um minuto aqui. Bom, bom dia a todos e todas. Como estou entrando, então sejam todos muito bem-vindos e bem-vindas. Queria dizer que é uma grande satisfação participar da abertura desse 6º Congresso de Inteligência Artificial da PUC São Paulo, que, como vocês já falaram, mas eu gostaria de repetir, né, é promovido pela Faculdade de Ciências Exatas e Tecnologia e pelo Programa de Pós-Graduação em Tecnologias da Inteligência e Design Digital, o TID. E há 2 anos, como foi colocado, em parceria com a PUC Campinas e com a PUC do Rio. Gostaria de cumprimentar com especial alegria os professores, as professoras, pesquisadoras e pesquisadores, estudantes e convidados nacionais e internacionais que se reúnem hoje nesse espaço, né, que é de diálogo, que é de criação, que é de reflexão. Quero cumprimentar o diretor da faculdade, né, o professor Daniel Gatti, que acaba de falar, e cumprimentar a todos na pessoa da professora Dora Kaufmann, também aqui presente, organizadora desse evento. E também deixar um agradecimento, né, e um cumprimento a todos e todas envolvidos na organização do evento, que como eu pude observar aqui na abertura, é muito bem organizado e certamente será muito rico. Para nós aqui da PUC, chegar à sexta edição desse congresso é por si só um efeito muito, muito revelador, né? O fato de estarmos há 6 anos reunidos para discutir o papel da inteligência artificial em suas múltiplas dimensões mostra, primeiro, que a IA já é parte indissociável, né, das nossas vidas. Está presente em pesquisa, está presente nas nossas práticas profissionais e nas nossas relações cotidianas. E exatamente por isso precisamos discuti-la, né, para sempre compreendê-la melhor e para aprendermos a utilizá-la, tanto de forma reflexiva, crítica e proveitosa, ao invés de dependente, né? Às vezes dá a impressão, quando vemos, por exemplo, os alunos de graduação utilizando, ainda utilizando de uma forma dependente e pouco reflexiva. Acho que esse congresso e essas discussões contribuem para a inversão desse processo. Discutir é produzir reflexão acadêmica, produzir conhecimento, efetivando o que a universidade tem de melhor, né? Pensar sempre o mundo em transformação e oferecer à sociedade instrumentos de compreensão e de ação sobre essa transformação. Além disso, para nós, né, o fato do tema da inteligência artificial ser debatido de forma contínua e aprofundada há 6 anos, através desse congresso, evidencia com muita alegria o lugar que a PUC tem ocupado, né, no cenário acadêmico, neste debate. Sendo, então, né, a partir dele, um reconhecimento da urgência de debater, né, esse novo processo, que assume um papel protagonista, e que, com isso, a PUC assume um papel protagonista na produção de conhecimento sobre temas decisivos do nosso tempo. Isso, para nós, é muito importante, é relevante e mostra, né, o lugar da PUC e a necessidade sempre de produção de conhecimento de rico conteúdo. Também é um motivo de orgulho ver o engajamento das comunidades acadêmicas, né, através aqui da PUC Campinas e da PUC do Rio. Por quê? Porque mostra a produção de conhecimento em rede, fortalece a pesquisa interdisciplinar e fomenta as novas gerações, né, de cientistas criadores. A pesquisa em rede e a produção de conhecimento coletivo e destinado à comunidade, para nós, é sempre uma questão fundamental. Também o apoio de instituições como o Google, que viabiliza, como vocês colocaram, bolsas auxílio aos projetos de pesquisa, mostra que a colaboração entre universidade e sociedade é essencial para o debate acadêmico, para a produção de conhecimento e, principalmente, no meu entender, para o retorno que a universidade deve sempre fazer à sociedade. Para finalizar, como uma brincadeira, né, trago uma reflexão, que seria ou uma provocação ou uma obviedade, porque eu não sou desta área, né, mas, como já colocado, todos estamos envolvidos com a IA. E a questão é, se estamos diante, né, de uma era marcada pela automação e pelos algoritmos, talvez o nosso maior desafio e também a nossa maior responsabilidade seja preservar o que há de mais humano em nós, a capacidade de pensar criticamente, de criar, de imaginar outros futuros possíveis, garantindo, então, que a IA amplie e não restrinja a experiência humana. Esse é um questionamento entre tantos outros que certamente vocês já têm discutido ou até já têm resolvido, né, ao longo dessas diferentes edições desse importante evento. Desejo a todos e todas um congresso muito, muito produtivo. Muito obrigada.
Professora Carla, muito obrigada. De fato, nós temos debatido muito esse tema, mas estamos longe de tê-lo resolvido. Eu acho que nem nós, nem a humanidade ainda resolveu esse desafio. Professor Antônio Valverde, por favor.
Bom dia, muito obrigado pelo convite. Saúdo os organizadores do evento, da figura do professor Daniel Couto Gatti, da professora Dora Kaufmann, não é? E é, penso o seguinte, estou chegando do 41º ENPROF, que é o Encontro Nacional dos Pró-Reitores, né, de Pós-Graduação e de Pesquisa, que ocorreu na PUC de Goiânia, não é? E o grande tema, pelo menos de palestras assim seguidas, né, 2 dias pelo menos, é exatamente a IA, não é? Tanto pelo CNPq, os partícipes do CNPq, como da CAPES, né? Sobretudo a IA generativa, como foi dito, né? E há uma questão de base que é o seguinte, quer dizer, a proposta do Ministério da Educação, nesses dois setores aí de pós, né, ou voltados ao pós, a CAPES e o CNPq, é o desafio de que o Brasil saia de uma situação de atraso tecnológico, e esse atraso tecnológico inclui a IA, e usando aqui o termo que foi usado, para deixar de ser um fazendão extrativista e repassando commodity para um lugar de destaque. Então, é oportuníssimo essa, esse encontro, e certamente esse debate, ele não está aqui restrito à PUC, está restrito a esse campo amplo, né, do Ministério da Educação, e, de fato, há uma grande, não só expectativa, mas uma grande possibilidade que a IA generativa, né, seja incorporada em todas as universidades. É, e depois, só relatando isso, né, trazendo aqui para a cena desse congresso, há uma concepção de que está havendo um uso é, ainda muito pobre e indevido da IA.
Congelou a imagem.
A conexão do professor Antônio,
Estamos
acho que
falando de inteligência artificial, mas o básico nem sempre funciona. Voltou.
deixa eu ver se voltou. Professor Antônio?
Voltou.
Voltou.
Sim, é IA. É o seguinte, uma urgência que foi colocada nesse encontro, né, de pró-reitores é exatamente a necessidade de regulamentação. O Brasil tem pouquíssimas universidades, poucas mesmo, acho que 3 ou 4, que têm essa regulamentação, não é? E toda essa discussão, ela foi balizada pela questão ética, não é? Pelo uso da IA, com questões éticas, sobretudo ligada à similaridade e plágio, não é? Que está ocorrendo numa escala eh, bastante ampliada. Não que não ocorresse antes, né? Mas agora exatamente na linha de que o uso da IA precisa ser eh, não só regulamentado, mas instruído, né? Uma coisa que eu saí pensando e talvez proponha para a reitoria é exatamente um letramento em IA para a universidade, né? Para conseguir. Bom, e tudo partia de uma pergunta que eu não fiz, mas que eu gostaria de ter feito por dever de ofício, que qual é a concepção de inteligência que é usado pela IA, né? Que inteligência é essa, né? E a resposta que é, apareceu por lá é o lidar com dados, né? Então, talvez uma coisa também, sem querer instruir aqui o processo, mas essa é uma pergunta. Então, tendo sempre como, só reforçando, né, essa questão ética no uso da IA. Agora, como a palavra autoridade apareceu aqui, né, autoridade em latim, o núcleo do termo significa o que faz crescer, autoridade é o que faz crescer, o que faz crescer em conhecimento. Então, somos todos autoridades. Muito obrigado, sucesso ao evento, e parabéns aos organizadores.
Eu queria só, por favor, reforçar dois pontos que o senhor professor Antônio abordou, que justamente me parece, a gente até já conversamos sobre isso, que a nova reitoria está sensível, né, professora Carla, tanto a criar uma governança de IA dentro da nossa universidade, quanto o letramento, a alfabetização de toda a comunidade, os professores em especial, em relação à inteligência artificial. Já está na pauta da reitoria, da nova reitoria. Agora eu queria, por favor, então, pedir para as breves palavras o professor David Oliveira, que é o nosso coordenador do TID. Seja bem-vindo, professor.
Olá, pessoal, bom dia a todas, bom dia a todos. Espero que todo mundo esteja bem. Com imensa satisfação que estou aqui presente nessa ilustre abertura do 6º Congresso, como a professora Dora bem falou, né, num país onde a gente está sempre correndo atrás de apagar algum incêndio e fazer algo muito rapidamente, né? Ter um congresso dessa natureza acontecendo por 6 anos consecutivos é algo louvável, né? Saúdo também todas as pesquisadoras, os pesquisadores que estarão presentes aqui nesses 2 dias apresentando seus projetos de pesquisa. Saúdo a reitoria aqui presente, a toda a organização, as pessoas que estão aqui organizando desde o início, né, professor Daniel, professora Dora, Karen, né, e toda a equipe técnica da DTI, todo o apoio também que um congresso dessa natureza e deste tamanho, né, ele não pode acontecer sem uma equipe muito grande por trás, né? E é muito interessante nesse 6º congresso, né, analisar isso, até um pouco o professor Daniel falou ali logo no começo, né, onde a gente sai, onde quando o congresso começa, ele está numa concepção muito técnica, né, e de uns anos para cá, né, sobretudo desde o final de 2022, a inteligência artificial vem permeando os debates, tanto na academia quanto na sociedade. E esse congresso, que eu acho que ele tem a missão, de continuar esse debate, aprofundar esse debate, não só nas dimensões técnicas, mas também nas dimensões sociais e éticas, né? Desejo a todas e a todos um excelente congresso. Parabéns por toda a organização.
Bom, muito obrigada a todos. De fato, as 150 projetos que foram submetidos esse ano são extremamente diversificados, né? Essa é também uma alegria, porque tem participação de todas as faculdades, de todos os programas de pós-graduação ou não, da graduação. Também tem uma divisão também relevante entre a participação da graduação, da pós, professores, alunos. Então, está bem diversificado e equilibrado. Isso nos dá também muita alegria, né? Não é só temos projetos da área médica, da área do direito, da comunicação, da educação, obviamente da área de tecnologia, mas realmente é muito diversificado. Então, isso é o objetivo, né? Desde o primeiro Congresso, nosso objetivo era incentivar a produção de projetos de pesquisa, projetos acadêmicos dentro da nossa comunidade, depois expandido às 2 PUCs que estão conosco agora. Então, estamos bastante satisfeitos por tudo que a gente tem conquistado e agradeço a participação, o apoio da reitoria, da pró-reitoria de pós-graduação, aonde o programa do TID é diretamente ligado, e Muito obrigada por todos, obrigado, professor Davi, pelo apoio, e mais uma vez queria agradecer a Carla e toda a equipe, porque de fato montar toda a logística, mesmo sendo virtual, do Congresso não é simples, e a Karen tem coordenado com absolutamente grande sucesso todos esses 6 anos. Então, muito obrigado a todos e vamos dar início. O primeiro palestrante é o professor Elias, e acho que a Karen vai convidá-lo, né?
Bom, antes de chamar, bom, quero agradecer a todos os professores aqui presentes por essa abertura maravilhosa. E aí a gente oficialmente dá as boas-vindas, né, a toda a comunidade acadêmica que se encontra aqui com a gente, para quem vai assistir depois, mas os docentes, pesquisadores, estudantes que participam com a gente, muito obrigada, pela fala de vocês. E reforçando, né, que são eventos como esses que demonstram o compromisso da PUC em contribuir de forma efetiva para a difusão dessa produção de conhecimento, né? Pesquisas tão diversas, tão ricas, e reforçam também o papel das universidades na formação de uma sociedade democrática, ética, inclusiva. Também de continuar, quero agradecer a presença dos intérpretes. A gente vai ter uma sessão agora que vai ter a tradução para português e inglês, e pelo primeiro ano a gente está com a tradução em Libras aqui, né, dos intérpretes de Libras, para a comunidade surda. Então, muito obrigada pela participação de vocês, na nossa programação, que hoje tem dois convidados na parte da manhã, né? Elias Baremboim, ele vai falar de inteligência artificial, inferência causal e contrafactual, e Carlos Arana, num segundo momento, que vai falar das diversas maneiras de usar IA no processo criativo. Depois, da parte da manhã, a gente faz um breve intervalo, e às 2 horas a gente volta na parte da tarde com a apresentação de 26 dos 52 projetos que foram submetidos para esse congresso. Vai ser um dia bastante intenso e a gente tá bem feliz com isso. A professora Dora também já citou, a gente vai premiar seriam 8, mas agora são 9 projetos selecionados pela comissão científica com as bolsas de 10 mil, com apoio do Google. Então, isso reforça a importância do nosso congresso. Então, assim, para a gente iniciar as atividades, eu vou passar a palavra novamente para o professor Davi Lemes, que vai receber o nosso primeiro convidado, Elias Baremboim. Então, ele já está conosco aqui, muito bem-vindo, welcome.
Thank you. Olá, tudo bem?
Então,
Doutor
professor,
Elias,
a palavra é sua. Muito obrigada a todos.
Obrigado.
muito
Bom
obrigado.
dia, Elias, é um prazer revê-lo.
Olá, Dora, tudo bem? Prazer, viu?
Olá, Elias, seja muito bem-vindo ao sexto Congresso de Inteligência Artificial da PUC São Paulo, este ano em parceria com a PUC Campinas e com a PUC Rio, né? Estamos aqui ansiosos, né, pela sua... É a primeira palestra do dia, né? Estamos aí com uma boa audiência nesse momento no nosso canal do YouTube, com muitos pesquisadores e alunos também, né? Seja muito bem-vindo.
Obrigado. Vou compartilhar minha tela. Eu acho que eu
Ok.
tenho que receber autorização. Você diz.
Karen, tem que autorizar o compartilhamento.
Pessoal do DTI, aí eu peço que autorize o compartilhamento de tela.
Ok.
Perfeito.
Vocês estão vendo?
Sim. E o professor
Ok.
Elias já está ouvindo a tradução em inglês, correto?
Na verdade, estou ouvindo em português, o que está ok para mim, mas eu falarei em inglês, ok?
Isso mesmo. Então, só para confirmar com o pessoal aqui no estúdio se tá tudo certo. Pode seguir, professor Elias.
Ok. Primeiro vou começar em português. Bom dia. Obrigado, Dora, pelo convite. Feliz em revê-la. Em breve estaremos juntos. Bom dia, professor Daniel, os organizadores. Feliz em estar aqui hoje, 7h34 horas de Nova York, cedo. Muito feliz de estar aqui hoje. Eu vou falar em inglês, ok, né? Para a palestra, assim. Okay, I'll be talking today about AI and how it relates to causality and how to, hopefully, how to build more general, safer, and I would hope, again, human-friendly types of intelligent systems. Yes, and what I call the towards causal artificial intelligence. Most of my talk will be based on this book. This is a draft is available there, causalai-book.net. It's my forthcoming textbook on causal AI. Happy to get feedback on your thoughts on the book. Why we're here today, and many people are interested in the topic. It's there are many kind of recent or important recent breakthroughs in AI. Systems are able to perform extremely well in making predictions in high-dimensional settings. More specifically, there has been a huge progress in the fields of natural language processing, NLP, and also computer vision and reinforcement learning. Applications are everywhere, from medicine to business, agriculture to space exploration, and so on. Here I pick just a few of them that maybe slightly more, people are not thinking about that, at least here in the US. AI and robotics are helping to optimize farms to increase productivity and crop yields. I have some friends in Brazil that are doing some of these things that may be more common there, but I would say agriculture in Brazil is highly automated, and it's kind of amazing, and AI is helping to do that. This is in the context of health, and you have AI and wearable cameras in self-walking robotic exoskeletons, and how you can help people with disabilities or handicapped to walk again. This is about how AI system is better than human doctors at predicting breast cancer. I was maybe a few months ago, or a little bit more, in Yale in the medical school, and I'm chatting during dinner with the MD, right, the future doctors, and they are telling me about how some of AI is already able to do very well in the exam that you have to become a doctor, and they are kind of a discussion revolve around what's maybe unique about the humans, and if they would have the job in the future. I think they probably will. That is kind of more elite type of doctors, right, in the US. But there's a good discussion about the implications to society. Maybe Dora also can you speak about that. I would guess that is quite important. But I think technology itself, if you put our hat of enthusiastic about is the technology there yet, in some way, in the more kind of superficial way, at least, is moving this direction. There's serious problems that I will elaborate. But anyhow, this was the conversation, and this is quite again, as a scientist in the field, I study the science of AI. This is quite amazing. We're having very interesting times, and I'm very happy. And I couldn't imagine that before when I left to the US, maybe 15 years ago, 16 years ago. I couldn't imagine that would be like that. I was excited about studying AI. I didn't know that it would progress at this pace, and it's quite amazing. We are blessed in some way. But one question that we can ask ourselves as methodologists or scientists, like, does this mean that we are done? Even if you give it, even if you assume that you can keep growing the amount of compute, right, the number of GPUs that we have and the amount of data that we have. I understand that this is not the case. We sometimes have limits, sometimes by definition have limited compute and data, but I'm doing like the thought experiment, right, the Duncan experiment about whether this will be the case. I think it's a valid question to kind of probe the limits about where we are. And if this is not the case, if you're not done, what is missing? Now, the other side of the coin here is the current challenges in AI that follow this breakthrough, these breakthroughs. There are still serious foundational issues. Current AI systems suffer from a lack of explainability capabilities. Some of the students here in the PhD and master program at Columbia, they are working for these companies, right? All these big techs. And then we talk with them or in the coffee, or they come to talk with you. And no one in reality, there's a relatively wide or broad acknowledgement that no one understands why these systems are working the way that they are. There's some level of description about how they are training the models, but the question about understanding even why this emergence happened and what is really happening there is very tough. And the systems in general do not explain themselves very well. They have a very relatively low level of understanding. They are very unfair or potentially unfair and unethical in terms of decision making. I usually say that I assume that from people in the area, I would say, what is a data set? A data set is nothing more than the picture of the reality that you are sampling from, right? The reality that we're kind of trying to observe and you sample from. Now, breaking news here, reality is messed up in their own way. Just the picture about what's going on in the world. Whenever you get this data and you use the data as a fuel, as a building block for the systems, right, to train the systems, we don't need a PhD in AI to say, what would you expect that the systems will learn? The system is tabula rasa and is just trying to capture some of the patterns, right? Patterns that are in the data, the salient points. Then many times the systems will be capturing these patterns and replicating, sometimes even amplifying the bias that we can have in this data. And of course, there is addressing or being more modern, more sexy, I guess, because it looks more modern, but in reality, it's just kind of trying to mimic features that are in the data. And I would say it's quite serious and concerning, and we will need something to counter that. Important point here, of course, if I'm putting my hat, if I'm teaching the basic kind of AI course or machine learning course, we have this, for decades, what was considered an axiom of the systems that, of the area, that is like, give me more data, and eventually things will be good. Right? Things will converge in some way. This is a kind of first encounter that this turns out not to be the case, because replicating the biases or replicating the patterns that are in the data is not our goal in the training process. Then, then we need a kind of new way of thinking about it, and others about where society is in the moment and where are you trying to move, and then to move these systems towards this direction. Have something that is not totally descriptive of the current reality / what is in the data, but something that allows us to talk in a normative or more in a more prescriptive way. Anyhow, to elaborate, these systems, AI systems, suffer from, or they are very data inefficient. Some things we have an infant, or I'm hearing my echo here, by the way, guys. But we have an infant. Someone opened the audio. Prescriptive way, to elaborate. These systems, AI systems, suffer from, or they are very data. Hello, can you hear me? have a
Yes, yes.
Pronto.
someone was with the audio open, and I was hearing my own. I think it's okay now. They are very data inefficient. There are some things sometimes you need something from an infant or even from a baby, and you have a few interactions in order to the natural agent, in this case is not our artificial agent, to be able to learn. And these systems need billions of data points in order to learn something. And while we can, in some way, given that there is some level of economic interest, and at the moment we could, anyhow, we're still able to get some data, but this kind of hint for us that are trying to think about the systems in a more structured way, there is some kind of a fundamental mismatch of what's going on there. That it doesn't feel right that you need so much data to learn something that for another type of learning system, such as a human, a baby, that they will take much less number of data points, a much smaller number of data points. These systems also suffer from generalizability. They are very poorly generalizable. We train here in this room, in this office, even if you allow the agent to do interventions in the world, you train it, and then you move to another room, and it is not hard to make it break in a way. They kind of break it easily, and the issue is an issue of generalizability, or as in the sciences, it is said, it's called external validity. It's very hard for them to generalize, and they're very kind of poorly robust. They also lack controllability, meaning we are training these models with sometimes dozens of billions of parameters. Then there is some kind of huge latent space there that is essentially what is the model, right? The description of the model. It is not possible, or it's very hard to go in the middle of this model and it's kind of changing one specific thing in order to bring about some change. In other words, to change the behavior of the system in some way. That's kind of not good, because we like to have the ability of steering the system in some direction, right? Anyhow, the system may be going or doing things that is not what we expect. Of course, there's all kinds of hacks, us training things that we do in order to try to patch the behavior of the agent. It's almost like putting a Band-Aid in the patient that has cancer. We can play this game and you can try to stop the bleeding in a more superficial way. Maybe we need to, but it is not the solution to the problem. It just, again, shows that there's some kind of fundamental issue going on there that we should, as an AI scientist or AI engineer, we should try to be aware and try to correct. Interestingly, those are kind of thorny, long-standing problems. It's not totally new. It's just kind of, it took another dimension, right? Given the number of people and the recent breakthroughs, the amount of dissemination and the contact with the broader society is much wider at the moment, right? Everyone is, if I get the Uber here, the Uber driver wants to talk with me about the GPT or Gemini or so on. But the problems are already there, kind of brewing. Now the implications, the stakes are quite high. Those are just examples of people kind of raising the flag. This is from CNN Business, saying the AI could pose extinction level threat to humans and the US must intervene. State Department Commission report warns. This is another from Nature, saying that AI and robotics breathing. There is a 5% risk that AI will wipe out humanity. I would say the 5% here, if you think about probabilities, it has zero meaning. This is like in some way a joke. But the non-joke here, the serious part is about there is a non-vanishing, greater than zero probability. That's some kind of, it's not a huge number, but greater than zero probability that some kind of bad event, catastrophic event could happen, and which is serious, right? Given that the negative of there's a huge negative reward here, and the question is about what are we doing about that? And I would say that there is some long way to go. There is some work to be done. This is from Nature Briefing. So, sorry, this is from let me read here. Humanity faces a catastrophic future if you don't regulate AI. Godfather of AI, Yoshua Bengio says. I have my own opinion about regulation, but I think it's just one of the people of the main researchers in the field kind of raising the flag here, the red flag, and which I think it makes sense. Regulation is another conversation. I digress here in this sense, but there is this somewhat concerning this existential risk, if you will. The question that we ask ourselves and this is all over the place. I was just getting here. I just Googling and getting some of the news quote, but in the last 2 or 3 years, we can find every week or even more frequently this type of news. The question that we ask in the lab is, do these problems have anything in common? It's like a bag of challenges there that we have, and many problems, or is any kind of structure there or anything that connects these problems? Because they are kind of very daunting, right? As I said, very thorny. And EB here, Elias, is speaking. At the core of these challenges, I believe that there is the absence of a robust causal understanding. Then, even though those lack of explainability or the decision making that is potentially unethical or unfair, or being so data inefficient and so on, the lack of controllability and generalizability, there is something about causality and in reality the invariances. Causality is about invariance and mechanism that is kind of missing from the systems, and it's very related to the notion of understanding even itself. That understanding what we're doing and what we're trying to do even more than what we're doing. Now, at the moment, it's a little bit like we're in the alchemy. We're in the very early stages, in the 1600s, I guess, of the science, and even before, I would say, if you're a reader of history. And we are kind of creating this kind of little monster here, this little Frankenstein, in some way, and still there is a need for having some type of scientific understanding, or more solid scientific understanding. In the book that I shared, I like to do the analogy, which is partially right, with the aeronautics, with the flying. If you're putting an airplane in the sky, there is a lot of even the Santos Dumont. There's a Brazilian, or the Wright brothers, and there's a lot of experimentation, and there is these clubs with the amateur people, like those very excited about flying, and they are kind of trying to mimic birds in some way and having the wings in their own ways that is literally mimicking. And we're in this some kind of early stage now. We're moving from an early stage to a slightly more mature, but still there's the need for developing the discipline and the science of AI. As it happens, by the way, and now we're able to put an airplane 20,000 feet and put 200, 300 people there and cross, right, from New York to I guess Brazil, across the ocean to Europe. It's quite amazing. We couldn't do that with the amateur. Very exciting and very quite interesting history. I recommend you checking. And I think we're in this stage in AI at the moment. And of course, different scale in terms of in some way of the funding and the industry develops, but still very early on. A key idea here that is kind of executed in my book is about that we like to model the agent-environment relationship through causal language. You have in some way, this cartoon here, you have the real world, you have the agent, and you like in some way the agent to perceive and collect data and have some understanding of the world, and or perceive the world, I should say. And then the agent acts in the world, and then you have this kind of this feedback loop of these types of interactions. And this is kind of mission that was raised by Alan Turing himself, that is one of the fathers of our field. We have the Turing Award, right, the Nobel of Computer Science. that say we want what we want is a machine that can learn from experience. Then Turing was right, as almost always right for someone from the field. This is a little bit like our religion. He was right as always, but he's a little bit underspecified. This word here, the keyword is experience. Experience is too broad. There are many different types of experiences about how both natural, like a human, or artificial agent, like an AI, how they interact with the world. And we would like to open up these kind of different types of experiences. This is my observation here, and we would like to kind of unpack the notion of what is experience. We'd like to modulate that. There's 3 different types that I will elaborate, but one is about seeing the world in a somewhat passive way and through sound waves or through the photos, through the eyes, and get that idea about what's going on there, including through reading. That is the current wave of AI is based on reading. GPT is kind of reading a huge amount, or GPT-like. These LLMs are reading huge amounts of data, but also we have the modality as human of interacting with the world through actions, through doing things, through our own muscles here. And we also have the ability of imagining, of thinking about the world in retrospect. It turns out that there's a name for that this is called the pro-causal hierarchy. In computer sciences, you form this hierarchy. You have the Chomsky hierarchy. You have, if you heard, that is in linguistic. You have the P versus NP, the complexity and hierarchy is the basic kind of algorithmic computer science foundations type of things. Here you have a hierarchy of languages that we can define. This, by the way, this is also called the ladder of causation. I'll make my second book recommendation here of the day. In part of my job here as a professor, I guess, is to make book recommendations and share pointers. This very best-selling book called The Book of Why by this guy that we call the Pro Hierarchy by Judea Pro, and Dana Mackenzie. The very good book explaining how causality or causal reasoning is intrinsically related to what it means to be a human in a way for thousands of years. And you go back in history and try to construct the main thesis that I think is very well defended and well put. It's about the centrality of causality and how humans are this is why it's called the why. We are kind of why machines or causal machines that we are trying to understand the world. And based on this understanding and this type of causal model that we construct based on our interactions, this is kind of guiding us to generate our understanding, our dreams, our expectations, our goals, and also this is what we have in our model in the box here in the brain, and also to modulate this relationship. Strongly recommended. It's a book from 2018. Now elaborating a little bit more about these different types of experiences. And the first one is about what I said that is related to seeing, about perceiving the world. We studied that, by the way. This is very related to correlations or associations. And when you have this type syntactically, how you write that probability of y or p of y given x. That is like if you observe an event, a random variable, big X is equal to little x, could be anyhow a collection of pixels, an image, or could be a text. What is your bet in the variable y being equal to little y? Then all modern machine learning since mid-80s and the 90s is built on how to evaluate expressions p of y given x. There's huge history of science, maybe since the 1600s or 1700s. We already have people using probability to play games of chance. And now this is the basic primitive of modern AI. That kind of replaced Boolean logic. We operated from logic from the 1950s when the field started until the mid-80s. This was very kind of Boolean-like, true and false. Then in the 80s, there is a huge summary here. Is a huge amount of details in history. But in the 80s, there was a bloody war or a lot of discussions in the field that used purely logic is too brittle. There's a whole shades of gray and ways that humans operate due to uncertainty, variability, lack of knowledge, sometimes intrinsic, sometimes just subjective. And then you kind of move towards trying to have a probability layer on top of our algorithms, on top of AI. Feed forward 40 years or 35, 40 years, 3 or 4 decades. Now this is the basic primitive that you use to train GPT. You're trying to estimate the probability of the next word. Anyhow, there's a very important primitive, very related to supervised in machine learning. The counterpart for that is supervised and unsupervised learning. Depending on the decade, you have a different formalism that people get excited about. If you are a student of history, as I'm enthusiastic of, maybe in the 80s or the 90s, you have a base net. At some point, you have a decision tree. Before that, in reality, at some point, you have a support vector machine. In the 2000s, 2010s, for sure, you have a deep neural net. At the moment, in the last few years, you have a transformer that is some specific architecture related to a neural net that is exploiting the primitive, but a very specific way of exploiting that. But anyhow, this is to say that we attempted, and you have a few hundred years again, since the initial scientists, right, the founding fathers of even the scientific revolution, you are with this type of P of y given x primitive. What's the difference? I got that from sometimes in our first course. Difference is like before you operate maybe with binary variables, with in general with small dimensionality for y and x. Now you operate with an x variable with a billion dimension. And it is about scaling up in some way. In the 1700s, people are doing that by hand in their notebook. Now you need a supercomputer in the size of in a big building, but in the side of this building or a floor of this building that is just doing compute that is unbelievable. But scale is kind of amazing and part of the bread and butter of computer science. Then we did well scale-wise in some way relative to this particular primitive. But now we can go on and you have the interventional type of data. It's a different type of capability or a different type of experience that you interact by doing, by acting in the environment. We need to enlarge the language here and you get a P of y given do x, to do the intervention in the variable x, given that you observe a context C, and then you would like to understand if you bring about the change in the variable y. What's the probability in the event y is equal to little y? What if I do x? Is the typical question here in English. What if I take the aspirin? Will my headache be cured? Again, the counterpart of that in machine learning is something called reinforcement learning. Rick Sutton and Andy Bartle just got the Turing Award this past year, by their contribution in reinforcement learning. It's about how you can play game such as the game of Go before you play chess. Now, how to play games and how to interact when you have actions in the system. Again, different formalisms depending on the decade and your level of understanding. Very common one is MDP, Markov decision processes, or a POMDP, a partially observable Markov decision process, a causal base net, and so on. Now, this is the interaction in terms of actions. There's a third layer here. I'm almost done here with the hierarchy or the different types of experiences that is related to humans imagining or thinking about the world, or doing what we call in a little bit more formal way, counterfactuals. Counter against factual. And the factual is all this number one and number two could be factual, could be something that happened in this world. And the counterfactual is something that we are kind of imagining that is contrary to what happened in this world. For example, let me try to parse this expression here with you. Note that we have an x prime and y prime here. X prime could be Joe took the drug. It is x, big X is equal to little x prime, and Joe is dead. He's gone. Y is equal to y prime. Now we can ask or wonder, would Joe be alive? That is y, that is the opposite of y prime. Had he not taken the drug, that is X subscript here, the Y here, Y sub X, that is X, that is the opposite of X prime. In reality, he took it and he is gone, unfortunately. But now, as a physician or as the data science team or as the AI, we can wonder if this is the case. Very related to the idea of also retrospection or introspection, depending if the agent or someone else is doing. Very a building block for the notion of blame, responsibility, credit assignment. All these notions are very human that that you use quite frequently in our daily lives. A primitive span or based on this notion of counterfactuals. The typical questions here, the why type of questions are also built on this idea. If you say, for example, that Joe will be alive had he not taken the drug, if you say that this is 099, then you can say, why Joe is dead? Joe is dead because he took the drug. Then it's important for why type of questions. There is some kind of reasoning about the causes of the effects of a cause, or the causes of the effect in this case, the other way around. Very related also with the questions here about what if I had acted differently, right? Humans are all the time doing something. Now, if I would say that even the staple here, if you want to put a stamp saying that what is intelligence, I would say it's pretty much not about getting it right, but it's about entertaining what we did in each of these interactions in the feedback loop and try to entertain the scenarios, the counterfactuals about what would have happened had we done differently. Maybe you have reached a better place, then you can kind of upgrade our own software and kind of move in a more efficient way in the future. This is the true learning is happening, I think, in this layer. But anyhow, was it the aspirin that stopped my headache? There's no counterpart exactly in machine learning about this type of reasoning. I'm not doing a paper review here collectively, of course, but there is no real counterpart. And this is very related to this structural causal model, or is a feature of a collection of causal mechanisms. The formalization of the PCH provides a way to measure the capabilities or the expressiveness of different formalisms with respect to increasingly complex queries. Now, each of these things here, P of y given x, P of y given to x comma c, P of y sub x given x prime and y prime. This is a very different, each one of those are different queries about the underlying reality, about the underlying causal mechanisms that the agent may be interested in answering, right, in articulating. What is the difference here? Another way of thinking about what's the difference between what I'm saying and more traditional ML. I use this picture here. I remove layer 3, I just keep layer 1 and 2, and I'm saying most of the case, most of the available data is observational. Elia's numbers here, 99% of the data in the world, 99, is coming from layer 1. It is passively collected. We are not in control of the data collection, but the agents, the humans and other agents, they are making their decisions based on their own free will. This is layer 1 data. And most of the interesting questions, or many of them, I would say 90% plus, but the number you can pick, is about layer 2 and layer 3. In other words, the query that we're trying to answer lives in layer, for example, 2 or 3, and the data is coming from layer 1. Then why layer 2? Because this is the inference about causal effects, about the effect of new policies, new treatments, new decisions, and in which we are entertaining the idea of intervening in the system, intervening in reality. Then the research question here, the underlying research question is about how to use the data collected from observations, that is layer 1, to answer questions about interventions, that is layer 2. Fundamental question here. There is a fundamental tension here because there is a mismatch between all results that we have in statistics and machine learning is when you have a perfect central lower large numbers, central limit theorem, all kinds of inequalities, like concentration. It's about, I have a sample, I sample from the distribution that I'm trying to make the inference, and eventually things will converge. The error will decrease. The error bar will eventually collapse or go small, at least in principle, when you get more data. Here, this is not the case, because we are sampling from one distribution, let's say distribution P, that is layer 1, and we're trying to make an inference about a distribution P prime that you have 0 data points. Then that's the question of causal inference and the motivation to the existence of the field. Another kind of way of addressing this challenge in a kind of modern way related to what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years is about, there is some kind of it is related to generative modeling. All these models, GPT, the G of GPT is about generation, the generative, Gemini and so on, is all about that. We have this unobserved reality. Now there is an underlying set of causal mechanisms that can describe this reality. It's almost like if you're talking about simulation, that's the code of nature that we have there. Now this reality is spanning the pro-causal hierarchy, the PCH, these 3 different layers. Layer 1, that is the observations, again, way of interacting with reality. Layer 1, that is observation, red, is one distribution. Layer 2, that is the intervention distribution. There are many interventions that you could do in reality, depending on how you perceive the reality. And there's many counterfactual distributions. That is the gray. There's many ways that reality could have gone, not necessarily that it did. Now, most of the times you don't observe all possible interventions because you don't have the capability of observing or intervening in the world in all possible ways. They're very costly. Intervention can be harmful, can be unethical, can be even technically infeasible. The FDA, Federal Drug Administration here in the US, the Vigilância Sanitária in Brazil, they run these RCTs, these randomized clinical trials, controlled trials, and sometimes these trials, at least in the US, cost, I don't know, $3 million, $5 million, $10 million, just to isolate in some way the patients a specific way and be able to sample from a particular layer 2 distribution. Anyhow, it is non-trivial to do experiments there. There's the cost and there's the ethical constraints to do experimentation with human subjects. But now you have, again, an abundant amount of data that is type 1, layer 1. Now, what's the game that is played here is about, we have on the right side here a neural model. It could be a transformer or any other kind of model that we call the M hat. The true collection of mechanisms called the M star. That's the truth, unobserved laws of nature. Now, in theory, this neural model, the M hat, is nothing more than a collection of mechanisms, a bunch of functions. Then in principle, it does have the potential of spanning the PCH or APCH. Now, what training means, layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, what training means is about, we'll get the data that you observe, that is the red one. We spend maybe one week, sometimes 1 month, sometimes 3 months in the cluster, right, in a cluster of GPUs, dancing around, trying to make the model in the right side, the M hat, to mimic what's going on in this M star in the observed data. And eventually you succeed. Now the question that you can answer is about, but what about layer 2? I usually call the fundamental problem of Gen AI. It is under what conditions inference in the right side in the M hat are valid. In other words, when do they recover the distributions induced by the M star, the left-hand side? In principle, nothing is connecting left and right other than the red type of data. We can also go further and ask the same question for the counterfactuals. And of course, many times we can observe partially some of the interventions, because you do interventions. Then let's say that you observe the red distribution and part of the yellow distribution, because as humans, you do some interventions in the world. And now the question is about, what about the other interventions that we haven't done? What about the counterfactuals that we haven't been in this multiverse with these different versions of the world? Then fundamental problem here, introducing nice to meet you fundamental problem. I think it's good to people to get a feeling and understand that this is underneath the current challenges that we have in AI. Now, I will elaborate this big picture here, mind picture that you should keep in mind, right? Mental picture. Now, what is our goal here? Our goal is to develop more general, take a step back, develop more general AI systems endowed with the following capabilities. Tying what I mentioned before, we would like these systems to be able to do causal and counterfactual generation for the yellow and to the green type of layers, not the red, leveraging the red type of data. We like the systems to be able to have some level of causal understanding and the ability of articulating explanations. We like the systems to be more efficient and precise in terms of decision making. We don't want to be so inefficient, so data hungry. We like the systems to be generalizable and robust. Again, to changing conditions in a way. The world is changing, the system should be able to pick up some kind of causal invariances there, not the superficial correlations that are changing somewhat frequently. And we also like the system to be able to learn about the world, maybe doing some science or do some kind of model learning and discovery. Each of these buckets here is one part of the book. This is why I share the book. It's a forthcoming book, but you can have access to the draft. But each of it is a capability that you should expect from modern AI or from the future of AI. Then I'll go here one by one, or at least based on the time here. And to confirm, I have maybe more half an hour, if I'm right, Professor David here. They give me a signal, but anyhow, I'll go as much as I can in each of these capabilities until I guess I'm cut. This is an example, baby example of generative modeling, toy example. I think many people here understand about the MNIST data set, that you have the digit, and then this is the variable D, this is the, and this is correlated with the color. Then there is no causation here. There is this dash bidirected arrow saying that the digit that we are picking from reality and the color of the digit are correlated. For example, if you see here in the bottom, you have the red, there's a distribution there, there's some kind of Gaussian-like distribution, is very concentrated around the red. And the zeros in the wild, in nature, tend to be red. Maybe the fives tend to be blue, or called cyan here. This is kind of more white, blue in English, or called cyan, but it's like called blue, or bluish. And so on. Now you have these two things. Nature samples some kind of random seed there, and then you sample the digit that you have in the color, and then you take a picture, and then you get the image I. There's a patch there, I don't remember now, but by 100 by 100, let's say. And this is an example of the images that you can have in reality. Now, what does it mean to do generation? It means to do generation is like, I want to, there's the query. The query is probability of the image I, given that, let's say I want to filter by the digit being equal to 0. Then I want to sample images of zeros from nature. And then this is in the right side here are examples of the zeros that you could have sampled. Great. Now this is layer 1 query. Of course, there are zeros that are other colors here, because there's a probability distribution, but given that it's concentrated around the red, and I know the answer, this is what I'm saying, because this is generated by us, then that's why you got a lot of red zeros. But what about interventions here, layer 2? What would it mean to sample from a layer 2 distribution? Now let's say that you went to this reality, in this case a simulator, and you intervene and you do the digit to be equal to a 0. Then in some way you are cutting this relationship between the D and the C, the digit and the color. We are not to nature to naturally unfold. We are doing an external intervention, and we are, with your own free will, I guess, from outside the system, fixing the digit to be equal to 0. Now we get a completely different probability distribution. You get zeros of all colors. You get zeros that are cyan, or blue, you get zeros that are orange, green, pink. And this is very rarely the case that you observe zeros like that in nature. It's kind of uniform across even all the colors. But this is the meaning of the intervention distribution. You're kind of disconnecting the unobserved confounding or confounding between D and C, and you set the value of D. Anyhow, I hope it makes sense. This is the meaning of interventional distribution. What about if you want to sample from the counterfactual distribution? Let me parse the query here. The query is like naturally the digit, the simulation of nature was running, the digit is equal to a 5, which is, they are usually cyan, they are using this blue. But now you wonder, you say, I want a sample from the distribution, sample of I, had the digit being a 0. Then we kind of get a lot of zeros, of course, because we fix the 0 here, but we have some kind of abductive step that the nature is kind of synchronized to be as if it's a 5. Then we get a lot of zeros that are, anyhow, get zeros because had it been a 0, D is equal to 0, that is the subscript, but given the natural is a 5. And all other attributes of this type of unit are aligned with the 5, which is this kind of bluish cyan type of color. Anyhow, that's the meaning of counterfactual. I hope it makes sense. Now let me go to another example that may be slightly more connectable and more real, a little bit less toyish. What would a person look like? Let's play the game, make me believe here. Or what if? What would a person look like had they been ... The end with the dot would be, let's change the age of the person. For example, first pair here, you have pairs. The first one is appears to be a female-like. And then you ask, what this person here in the left would look like had it been older. This is a younger female, I guess. And you ask, what would happen if it been 10 years older? And then you get a picture of this guy that it does look like a little bit older. Then the age is somewhat as we expect, but you have a flip in the gender, which doesn't feel consistent with our expectation. It's quite off here, this counterfactual. You ask the AI, the Gen AI, to get another picture, and you get the picture of this female here that is blonde and young, and you ask, what would this person look like had it been another gender? And then you get someone from, it seems right. The gender seems right, but the person seems to be another age group. And the type of hair, maybe there is a gray hair there that she doesn't have. She is kind of blonde. And there is some kind of mismatch between this pair. In other words, it doesn't feel to be the right counterfactual here. I will skip just the gray hair, but same idea here for the sake of time. Then this is to say that there is something that is not keep it right when you ask for the counterfactual generation. Now, if you add some type of causal generation here, or causal knowledge in the generation, maybe it turns out to be true, by the way, in the data set. This is a data set called celebrities, celeb A. There is some age and gender, there is some correlation between these things. Then in this data set, females tend to be younger there are more females that are younger and males that are older. And that we're trying to model here through this dash bidirected arrows. We don't know what happens in the sampling process that led to this skewness in the distribution. Always the case, by the way, it's very rare that have uniform, because it's high dimensional problems here. Right now, there's this overrepresentation of these different groups. And also age. When age is growing, it is true that the amount of gray hair also grows. There's a probabilistic relation, of course, not deterministic, but there is this kind of monotonic probabilistic relation there. Now, if you add this type of knowledge, you could say, AI, give me a human face, and then you get a face of this guy with glasses. And then you could ask, would you be alive? What would the person look like? What would the person look like had they been older, 10 years older? And you get this picture here, which it seems counterfactually consistent, right? It seems the older version of this person, of this unit. Another question here, you ask the picture, Gen AI, give me a human face, and then you get this lady here It is a brunette and younger, and then you ask, how would this person look like had they been a different gender? And then here I'm doing the biological guess for the sake of discussion, nothing prescriptive, of course. And then you get this guy here on the other side as the counterfactual pair, which kind of makes sense. They even look like twin brothers. This is generated by the AI. Let me see here. This is another one, by the way, that we have in the literature that people get. There's some good amount of commotion here. That we have the input picture is the one in the left, and then we could ask the AI similar question, making them like look at flight attendant, and then we end up flipping the gender with one of them, the second person here, to become a female. It's a huge commotion, right? People are like, wow, this is unfair, this is wrong. Of course, it's wrong, it's totally off. But this is nothing more than AI being overwhelmed by the correlation that happened, that it is in the real world between gender and the job type. Right? There's a strong correlation here, and there's more flight attendants that are female. Is it right, not right? It's another conversation, but you use the data from the real world. You train the AI. AI is just overwhelmed by that. It's unable to understand what's really happening. There's another one. You can ask for the same pair here, make them look like doctors. And then you flip the gender, one of them to become a male. Again, it's just the correlation, just quote unquote, it's totally off societally, in terms of society speaking and expectation. It's totally, not right, but not kosher, but this is just the AI being messed up or overwhelmed by the correlation. The key observation here that sampling from the joint counterfactual distribution, P of I, comma I sub X. So I had X being X, had the age being older, had the job type being different, had the gender being another one. We're trying to sample from this joint counterfactual distribution. This is not identifiable in general. Then the key technical result here, if you wish, is about that develop counterfactually. Our goal is to develop counterfactually consistent estimators that are guaranteed to perform generation within the counterfactual bounds or in a consistent way. That's the task here. The task. This is another example that is a recent one, not published. You kind of input this picture here of the rabbit with the carrot, and then you can ask what would happen had this is GPT result, by the way, the non-causal one, the yellow. Yellow is non-causal and blue is causal. And you ask GPT to do that with the picture, and you get some wolf like that. There's even two faces here that is totally off, and there is this fake. And now I think one could argue that the causal GPT, our system here, is the one that this is kind of towards expectation here, that the rabbit should be scared in some ways, not far-fetched, it's scared, and the wolf is chasing the rabbit. I think is a no-brainer here in a way. Again, this is just the AI is kind of overwhelmed by some of the correlations here in the wrong way. This is another one that you can ask for the causal GPT. I guess that I was not expecting that this is generated by the AI, and then I was not expecting that our system would generate something like that. Given that we didn't control the age, the AI generated a baby wolf, which is not totally crazy that the rabbit will be a little bit, there's a surprising face here, but it is not running away, right? It's not so scared in a way. And I thought it was a cute, unexpected result that we got. This is about causal and counterfactual generated. We can do exactly the same things with language as well. I didn't do that because too many words, but we can get problems in the same way when we are doing counterfactual generation and change a story in the middle and ask the same, what would happen had the person going to the swimming pool instead of going to the judo practice? And then you have a kind of messed up story there. Just an example that you're playing. There are many variations of that with any kind of modality. But this is about the capability that we'd expect to be interventionally and counterfactual consistent in generation of these models, which at the moment it is not. Another capability that we expect is the having some level of causal understanding and articulating an explanation. And I would like to elaborate that the census. Just let me check here. Professor David, do I have more 15 minutes, or is it okay? Just to double check. Oh, it is okay. Okay. I will continue then. The U.S. Census, this is U.S. Census data from 2018 that we have access to this data. This is under the fairness.causalai.net, and causalai.net is my lab. Check there what we're doing in terms of the science and a little bit more the technical details. But suppose that we have this kind of many variables here. One of the variables is gender, and we're trying to the gender, and the gender may affect salary. And the data science team observes the total variation here, the TV, the expected salary, expected value of Y, given that is a male, minus expected E of Y given female, there is some kind of difference there. I forgot the number, but I think it's $17,000, 17K difference between males and females. And now there's a disparity there. And the question is like, this disparity could the disparity be, is it the case that the US government here is guilty of gender discrimination, or there's other reasons or the causes for us to see in the data that there is this disparity there? Then that's the thing. Now it turns out that the disparity could be explained by different causal mechanisms or different mechanisms. The salary decision could be based on the employer gender. Someone in the HR, the human resources, or the boss can be checking, seeing into the gender, and immediately changing the salaries based on the gender of the person. And this is a case of direct discrimination. This is one of the possible mechanisms. Mechanism number one. There's a second one, that the decisions about the salary could be based on other factors. The gender is affecting the educational level. In computer science, for example, in CS, for example, there are much more PhDs, the males than females. Then gender is affecting the type of job and the education level. Then this is arrow from X to W. But now the company may be using the education level and maybe using the type of education, right? The education level, having a PhD or not having a PhD, right? A doctorate degree. Or, yeah, anyhow, the type of the job. Is this a CS, I don't know, AI type of major? Now, based on that, the arrow from W to Y, the decision maker using that, and then is deciding, oh, I'll give a bump here, $100,000 more if the person has a PhD level and is understand about this AI technology. It's not uncommon, by the way. There's a hot market in some sense, depending on the bump, but it's 100K, 200K, whatever number. But there is a bump there. This is a mechanism number two. It's not that it's directly affected by number one, that is X affects Y, but X affects W and W affects Y. Another option is that age or nationality may be correlated with gender. It happens here if you open this data set. But now people may be using the nationality to decide what is the salary. Maybe not right, but whatever, right? It may be happening in a way. You're kind of taking, maybe in the US, someone is taking advantage because they are in the different types of visa, right? They have less stability, then they can try to take advantage of the person. I'm not saying that it's happening, but it could be happening. Now, after a legal argument, the jury may be okay, it may be kosher that the Y variations, the variations in salary due to education, but it is not okay, it is not kosher, the variations that are due to gender or due to age. Then in some way, this green arrow here, these green variations, that is, I can use the education, it's called even business necessity. I can use if the person has a higher type of degree in this particular field, but it is not okay to look into the gender directly or look into the age and nationality and change my salaries. Now the serious question here, the mathematical question, not the serious. The mathematical question here, mathematical counterpart, is about how to disentangle the variations that are within the total variation. Because in layer one, that is the expected salary given male versus female, everything goes. These three different types of mechanisms, 1, 2, and 3 here, I kind of mingle there. I kind of collapse there. And now our goal is to open up this thing and explain how much is going by each of the type. Of course, the input from society about which kind of pathway, which kind of mechanism is kosher or not kosher. Now, the number there in this particular data set is around $14,000, 14K. And you can run the analysis. For example, the red one here is the 14K. The green one here is about the direct effect. That is the one that is from gender to salary. The blue one here is about the indirect effect, we call the IE. And the purple one is about the spurious effect. That is the one from age and nationality. And kind of running the analysis, depending if you use or don't use the causal one, you get one in this one, the direct effect is huge, which is clearly not kosher. It's not okay to look at the gender and change your probabilities of giving a high salary or low salary. In this one is mostly spurious here in this case. But anyhow, the observation here is about the TV, the total variation, cannot distinguish causally different explanation. We need some type of causal method to open up the TV and say this is the right explanation. And maybe there is this amount of discrimination here. This is not okay, but this is okay. Now this is what I call explanation. I would skip here, but you can do the same. This is the college admissions. We're trying to do in the US. This was just struck down by the Supreme Court, where to try for decades to do some sort of affirmative action. And then you can kind of trace this data about the amount of total variation, direct discrimination, or the affirmative action, and the idea of the affirmative action, that this is a decade here. We are like to kind of track that and see that it is decreasing over time, and you don't need to do this type of reparatory policy. Right now, I will skip there, but very interesting. Check the fairness.causal AI or drop me a line. Now, I would like to briefly just to go over another capability that is the efficient and precise decision making, just to get a feeling about what this could mean. This is kind of cartoon picture from Sutton and Bartow, the guys that got the Turing Award from the work in reinforcement learning. That is like, we have the agent in the environment, the world. The agent perceives the environment. There's a context of state. The agent then processes something, decides and intervene in the world, take an action, and then observe a reward. This was a good action or a bad action, and keep doing that. The difference here from this picture to our picture, the two key observations here, when you move to a more standard or traditional reinforcement learning to a less traditional or causal reinforcement learning, is the environment and the agent are tied through the pair. There is a collection of causal mechanism M that describes the environment that we don't observe, but is there, the physics, quote unquote, and a causal graph or a causal model G in the agent side. And also, we don't talk broadly, as I mentioned earlier, about actions as is taught in the literature. The idea of experience or action is overloaded. Now we have different types of interactions that are the different layers that we discuss. Layer 1, observational, layer 2 that is interventional, and layer 3 that is counterfactual. And then when we get this picture, there are different new challenges and opportunities here to make decisions, to do decision making. I'll not go one by one, because anyhow, this is the work that we have been doing for the last decade, the last 10 years. But there is a summary there and a tutorial, a 3-hour, I think it's a 3-hour tutorial that I gave a few years ago, CRL, Causal Reinforcement Learning, crl.causalai.net. There are the different tasks here that we are, literature, and we are usually blind if you are non-causal. One is called the causal offline and online learning. Those are the reference here for people that are in the AI field. This is some of the main venues in the field. I've been publishing consistently about that. Let me give you an example about what is cool, what is the causal online to offline learning. This is in the context of cancer. Let me skip the description here. Some type of leukemia is a decision X1, and there's a decision X2. Then people come after, I don't know, a month here. I don't remember the exact example, but I think it's like a month or 2 months to the hospital. This is the shot, X1 and X2, the decision that will decide the type of drug that will do chemotherapy or other type of treatment, less or more aggressive type of treatment. And this is the states. It's blood reading and other kinds of readings related to the cancer of the person. State S1, state S2, and a final state Y. That is the final outcome. Survival after 6 months of taking the drug. They are having the treatment. And there is this unobserved variable U that is affecting all the other variables. Is the mood of the person, the quality of life, or the type of diet, and so on. There are many items here that we don't have access to this data. And there are unobserved confounding affecting this system. And now this is the kind of result that we get, the kind of plot that we have. The x-axis is the number of episodes, or the number of rounds that we have, the number of patients that we have in this context, we'll say. And the y-axis is what we call the cumulative regret. That is an oracle. Let's say that there's an oracle, magical oracle, that is able to know what is the right treatment for each of the patients. We don't have that, but ideally there exists the oracle. And the regret is the oracle minus what our algorithm is doing, what our allocation procedure is doing. Now, if you use the strategy in the literature that we do some randomization there to learn what is the right treatment, you get this red curve. That at least now it looks like even linear. That is very bad. It's a disaster. We don't want to be linearly killing people here for this treatment, which is happening here. There's very little learning going on here. Now, if you use some causality and this type of model, you get the blue line. There's some kind of logarithmic thing that, yeah, in the beginning, there's exponential growth here, and you are kind of doing experimentation to learn the type of the customer, right? The customer in this case is the patient, and but eventually it kind of is flattened because you kind of learn how to do the treatment allocation, and it's kind of very good if you use the causality here. That is the best that you can do with layer 2 data. Now there is an interesting case that is the green one, that if you have data from the hospital that is layer 1, that is even when the doctors are biased and making wrong decisions, we can try to leverage that. And then we just need a little bit of data and the whole thing is flattened from the beginning, which is kind of the dream. There's very little killing here, or very little, making dramatic here, very little experimentation. Because very early on, you can already learn what's the optimal treatment allocation. Then this is the kind of cool task that we have. This is example of task 1. There's other tasks between when and where to intervene that I'll defer. There's a recent paper in New Rips that is just happening, I think, in California this year. Is the main conference, maybe I'll see you there, about when and where to intervene. And given that we would like to be more surgical, more parsimonious in our interventions. We don't want to do a fat hand interventions or change everything and a big mess in the system. There's also about counterfactual decision making. I'll skip for now. About generalizability and robustness. About learning the causal model by combining observations and experimentation. There is also about imitation learning. We learn a lot about imitating others. I will skip for now. There's about curriculum learning. How do you design a curriculum such that we can speed up the learning of the AI? We do that with human agents, right? We have the whole first grade, second grade, high school, university, and so on. There is a kind of chaining of concepts. We like to do that with AI as well. There is something also called automatic, or sorry, not automatic. We are doing automatic, but reward shaping. How do you put the breadcrumbs? How do you amplify the signal such that the agent can learn faster? I will not do this one, but anyhow, just for the sake of time. But here there is some kind of wind, and there is the lava here. The agent needs to kind of find go to the exit of the maze, get the coins, and avoid the lava walls. But then there is the wind that is blowing that the agent is unable to proceed. There's some kind of unobserved confounder. Same way that there is gravity, or there is the current in the sea of the flow in the traffic. There is these forces that are affecting the agent in a way. and then we're trying to let me just not do it for the sake of time. It's very cool stuff in reality. And also to conclude here, this at least this model, even there is some kind of interesting interactions with game theory. Then it turns out that Nash, whatever you do, whenever you learn in game theory, it is related to layer 2. It is all notions of Nash equilibrium and playing strategic games. It's a very recent paper, by the way. It's not even published at the moment. It's under review. But it turns out to be layer 2. And we can have better theories or better ways of reconciling. This is kind of prescriptive, what you should do in terms of learning theory. But in reality, if you go to behavioral economics, humans are not following Nash description. And Danny Kahneman and other people in this literature. Then it turns out that there are situations that agents that are deemed irrational can be playing better than rational agents. And this is kind of puzzle to some of the literature, or this two game theory and behavioral econ. And then the question here is about, can you reconcile that? And I'm very surprised and very excited about it is possible to reconcile. There is something called layer 3, counterfactual decision theory that you propose that in reality dominates both the standard decision theory, the standard game theory, and when the agent is irrational, which is kind of amazing. Happy to talk about, or even come here, Dora, invited in the future to just give a talk about this one. Sometimes I give a talk about a specific task. My goal here today is just to show the graph and what is causal inference and how it connects with the world. This is about decision making. I will skip the robust just for the sake of time. But yeah, just the box are quite opaque. The AI box nowadays, and you would like to be able to open these boxes and have them interpretable and understand why they are even asking or working the way that they are working, and try to add this degree of robustness, right? That we are not unable, very common in the field. You can kind of fool these systems and change a few pixels or things in the sentence, and the system go wild, right? It takes a complete tangent. And of course, because there is very little understanding at the moment. And yeah, that's the idea. Then we like to add this layer there. This is part 4 of my book. But anyhow, to summarize what we're trying to do, what is our research program here? It's kind of invitation also for participation and conversation here, or now, or you can drop me a line. We would like to develop more general and trustworthy and safer types of AI that will be endowed with the following capabilities: have the capability of doing causal and counterfactual generation, not being fooled by the correlations that are in the data. They also should have some type of causal understanding and having the ability to articulate some kind of explanations. They should be more efficient and precise in terms of decision making, have kind of more surgical decision making, be able to learn with fewer data points, not needing a billion data points, because we cannot do so many interventions in the world either. There's all kinds of ethical, there is all kinds of costs, and there is all kinds of technical constraints in order to run interventions in the world. We would like the system to be more generalizable and robust to changing conditions and different populations. You also like the model eventually to be able to do some science and to be able to do some kind of discovery. This is kind of the program. There's a little summary of what is in the book. Take a look there. This is a draft. Also, I don't have the time today, but take a look in this website. It's the beginning of what we call the LLM-observatory.org, LLM-observatory.org. That is some kind of benchmark. We're starting there. It was surprising, but not even layer 1 at the moment. I'm not talking about reasoning. Even to do some type of retrieval of layer 1 data about statistics about the underlying population, it is already challenging for most of these models. We're trying to benchmark that in our what we call the LLM observatory. Soon we'll benchmark layer 2 and layer 3, interventional and counterfactual capabilities. But we are looking also collaborators there in this initiative, and very specific about benchmarking. And the other side of the coin in developing the methods is about benchmarking the methods in the proper way, even to, in a somewhat experimental or mathematical way, be able to diagnose what is going on there. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for the funders, NSF, the Sloan Foundation, DARPA, Air Force, Naval, and NIH. Also in the left, this is my team here at Columbia, in the left, and also the external collaborators in the right. Happy to get questions now. Thank you.
Professor Elias, parabéns pela palestra. Muito interessante o assunto que você traz aqui para a nossa audiência, né? Parabéns também pelo livro, né? E é muito interessante que você diz ali no seu livro que ainda ele está numa versão, é um draft ainda, é um rascunho, mas ele tem 1.276 páginas escritas.
Yes, yes.
É isso, né?
Draft, but draft, I mean, no momento, at the moment, né, a gente está em negociação com os publishers. Then ele vai sair como livro oficial, né, um livro texto, na verdade, mas draft contém todas as also legal issues, não? It's but yeah, é uma versão final, digo, submetidas para os publishers, right, para os editores, e a gente está nesse estágio aí de final de editing, negotiation, editing, but não espero ter muitas mais páginas, está suficiente. Estamos tentando cortar algumas, mas obrigado, professor David.
Muito bem. Eu acho que você deixou o link aqui, né? Eu acho que a nossa audiência aí poderá acessar o livro, né? E é muito interessante. Eu acessei aqui durante a palestra. Você convida também as pessoas a colaborarem, né? Está logo ali no início do livro. Você também convidou as pessoas a interagirem com você nas redes sociais, né? Sobre esse assunto. E nós temos aqui, a gente está chegando bem perto do final do nosso horário, né? E temos uma pergunta, uma única pergunta da audiência até agora, né? Farei ela em português e vamos ver se a gente consegue dialogar um pouco sobre ela, né? A pergunta vem do Pedro Ernesto, tá? Ele diz o seguinte, né? A utilização da IA, inteligência artificial simbólica, que está em pesquisa, poderia nos auxiliar nessas questões da etapa 3, eu estou achando que na terceira camada que você se referiu, né? Teríamos uma inteligência artificial orientada por signos, segundo a semiótica? É a pergunta e sobretudo a semiótica de Peirce, né, que o Pedro Ernesto traz.
Yeah, o primeiro, sobre acho que tem duas perguntas. Vou começar pela primeira, que eu entendo. Deixa eu pensar como responder em português aqui. Toda nossa IA, peço perdão, by the way, não falei anteriormente para a audiência, espero que seja ok ter falado a palestra em inglês. Eu falo português, eu sou brasileiro, mas não estou acostumado a falar tanto sobre esse assunto nos últimos 16 anos, 17 anos da minha vida, eu tenho conversado sobre esse assunto em inglês, ou seja, estou viesado, eu acho, para os termos em inglês, mas espero que esteja
Fique tranquilo que tivemos tradução simultânea, professor. Pode ficar tranquilo.
Ótimo. Mas e a simbólica, eu acredito na neurosymbolic AI, AI neurosimbólica de alguma maneira, e nós falamos, todas as vezes que a gente fala alguma variável, tem a variável X, que é uma decisão, né? Uma decisão, um tratamento, a variável Y, a Y, que é um outcome qualquer, o survival do patient, sobrevida do paciente depois de 1 ano de tratamento. Todas as variáveis e ter esse modeling específico dessa maneira são simbólicas, né? A gente acredita em símbolos. Eu acho que existiu alguma discussão, talvez em algum nível talvez exista ainda, mas talvez há 3 anos atrás, 4, 5, que parecia que existia alguma tensão relacionada a ser simbólico ou não ser simbólico, ou ser neural. E eu falo de alguma maneira com amigos, ou de uma maneira mais informal, acredito que dado a questão do Brasil, falando como brasileiro, de maneira mais informal, que tem algumas religiões que são envolvidas, tem uma tensão e pessoas brigando como se fosse uma briga religiosa de algum tipo. E acredito que isso é muito mais diluído hoje em dia e, de alguma maneira, o futuro será um híbrido e a gente não existe dúvida que tem uma parte simbólica e não acho que tem um way out, não tem uma maneira de circumvent, de evitar isso, mas também neural. Talvez existiam discussões na área de IA 10 anos atrás, 20 anos atrás, about 10, talvez até 12 anos atrás ou 13 anos atrás, será que está certo fazer o deep learning e ter redes neurais? Existia essa não era um no-brainer. Uma parte da comunidade que achava que isso é o certo, uma outra parte que era o skeptical. Feed forward, né? Avança a fita 10 anos, 15 anos, não existe dúvida nenhuma que é neural também. E é neural e simbólico. Eu acho que a discussão hoje, a discussão que eu estou tentando trazer, que para mim é um no-brainer, mas não é 100%, talvez não todo mundo consiga visualizar isso no momento. Foi claro para o Pro, Judea Pro, do Book of Life, que eu mencionei, era claro para ele, talvez há 30, deixa eu ver, 1990, 35 anos atrás, 35 anos atrás, que a causalidade seria um componente importante do puzzle, né, do quebra-cabeça que a gente está tentando resolver como uma comunidade. E não era claro para muita gente há 35 anos atrás. Talvez para mim, quando eu decidi vir no PhD, há 17, quase 20 anos, né, 15, 20 anos atrás, para mim era somewhat claro, né? Eu falei, eu quero trabalhar nisso e tal. Começou a ficar claro há 10 anos ou 12 anos atrás, 100% claro que causalidade é uma parte importante do puzzle e temos que ter isso. Tem muito mais gente hoje em dia que é nessa comunidade causal e está claro na cabeça que a gente deveria ter um neurocausal model de algum tipo, mas não é todo mundo no mundo hoje em dia acredita nisso. Que é a perspectiva, é a minha hipótese. Eu vivo essa minha religion, acredito que seja verdade, minha belief. E aí a gente faz o trabalho técnico. Mas eu te diria que simbólico ou não simbólico, voltando para a pergunta, simbólico ou não simbólico, eu te diria que é neurosymbolic. E eu acho que essa questão de alguma maneira está resolvida.
Muito bem.
Eu vou deferir
offline.
Na segunda parte da pergunta, defiro que não é a minha área da semiótica, mas feliz em conversar offline sobre ela, se tivesse interesse.
Ok, perfeito. Fica o convite aí para o Pedro Ernesto interagir diretamente com você via as redes sociais. Professor Elias, agradeço imensamente em nome do TID, do Programa de Pós-Graduação em Tecnologia da Inteligência e Design Digital da PUC São Paulo, em nome do 6º Congresso de Inteligência Artificial, que também tem as participações da PUC Rio e também da PUC Campinas. Nós estamos chegando aí ao nosso limite, mas parece que tem mais uma pergunta que apareceu aqui agora no chat, né? A pergunta é da Priscila. Ó, eu já ia fazer um encerramento, mas temos mais uma pergunta. Nos últimos, assim, a mídia noticia muito questões relacionadas ao meio ambiente, né? E a Priscila traz aqui uma questão de fechamento, inclusive, em função do nosso tempo, né? Se você acredita que temos tempo hábil para fazer com que a inteligência artificial seja menos impactante para o nosso meio ambiente.
Yeah, obrigado pela pergunta. Poderíamos ficar meia hora conversando sobre isso. Eu vou dar uma resposta rápida. Peço desculpas à pessoa que perguntou em responder. Vou botar de uma maneira. Se, se, entende, se entendemos, todas as questões, a maioria das questões do meio ambiente são perguntas causais, ou intervencionais ou contrafatuais. Layer 2, né, a segunda camada, e a terceira camada da hierarquia causal. Caso tenhamos educação, agradeço a PUC de São Paulo pela oportunidade. Caso temos a educação da próxima geração dos data scientists e analista de dados, e pessoas AI engineers, né, e pessoas que vão construir AI, de entender a lei, porque as perguntas são efeitos de decisões e políticas públicas, e a maioria dos dados sobre o ambiente são layer 1, ou são observacionais. É difícil fazer as intervenções para testar o efeito das nossas intervenções. Muito raramente a gente consegue fazer uma intervenção. Ou seja, caso consigamos educar a geração dos data scientists e AI engineers com esse tipo de ferramentas, não acredito que a pergunta seja teremos tempo hábil. Eu digo, vamos fazer, não temos uma opção de alguma maneira. Temos que botar a mão na massa e ir nessa direção. E agora, né? Temos muito do luxo, né? O luxury. Gastamos mais tempo com isso. É o que eu diria por agora. Feliz em elaborar, ficaria feliz em elaborar num painel no futuro, porque é uma boa pergunta, na verdade, é uma pergunta geral.
Muito bem. Bom, fica para o futuro. Mas passa pela educação, né, professor? Novamente, né, estamos aqui.
Passa pela educação.
Exatamente. Estamos no nosso tempo limite para o início da próxima palestra, da próxima mesa redonda. Novamente, agradeço a sua participação aqui em nossa audiência. De novo, agradeço em nome do Programa de Pós-Graduação, o TID, da PUC São Paulo, e em nome também do 6º Congresso de Inteligência Artificial. O debate foi riquíssimo, né? Ficará aqui nos nossos canais do YouTube. Muito obrigado. Se quiser proferir as palavras finais para a nossa audiência, fique à vontade, professor Elias.
Obrigado à audiência, obrigado ao professor Davi por moderar, obrigado a Dora pelo convite. Em breve estaremos juntos. Dora, feliz em conversar quando eu estiver em São Paulo, talvez no futuro. E, por favor, mande mensagem se tiver alguma coisa interessante, ou tiverem perguntas, ou quiserem fazer um brainstorm, né, trocar uma ideia sobre alguma coisa. Fico feliz em continuar a conversa. E parabéns pelo evento.
Muito obrigado.
Bye, tchau.
Tchau, tchau.
Obrigada. Maravilhoso. Muito obrigada, professor Elias, professor Davi. E eu passo agora a palavra, que já está aqui nos nossos estúdios, professor Carlos Arana, professor Marcos Bastos, que vai fazer a mediação do nosso próximo painel. Então, chamo para cá. Professor Marcos, muito bem-vindo. Vou passar
bom
a
dia.
palavra, né, para que possa apresentar o nosso próximo convidado, professor Carlos Arana. Esse tempo é de vocês. Muito obrigada.
Bom, queria agradecer, Karen, queria agradecer especialmente a Dora pelo convite e a oportunidade de estar moderando essa mesa. A gente vai passar agora para um debate que é uma das questões cruciais em termos de discussão sobre inteligência artificial, que está ligada ao processo criativo, né? O professor Carlos Arana vai fazer uma palestra chamada Different Ways to Use AI in the Creative Process. E é um debate crucial, né? Uma das coisas que tem causado extremamente polêmicas dentro da comunidade que pesquisa inteligência artificial, né? Saber até que ponto ela tem criatividade ou não, por exemplo, e questões desse tipo, né? O professor Carlos Arana, ele é guitarrista, produtor e escritor. Como pesquisador e e professor, ele se dedica ao aprendizado de máquina e IA em universidades como a MIT, UC Berkeley, e atualmente ele administra o curso de IA para música e áudio na Berklee College of Music em Boston. Então eu vou passar a palavra a ele, professor Carlos Arana. It's up to you now.
Ele está tentando conectar aqui o vídeo. Peço para o pessoal do DTI, por favor, liberar. Ele não está conseguindo acionar lá a função do vídeo. Só uns minutinhos. Vamos ver se ele consegue. O professor Carlos, ele está dizendo que ele não consegue acionar o vídeo lá. Não sei como ele mudaria de conta, acho que não adianta. Veja se o áudio está funcionando, professor Carlos.
Funciona sim, mas não tem o vídeo. Não sei. You cannot start your video because it's disabled by the host, says here.
Aceite o pedido para ser co-host, porque eu acho que aí vai conseguir acionar o vídeo.
Uhum. Uhum. Não tenho. Onde é que está isso?
Não sei se o Diego, que está aqui no backstage, consegue intervir nesse sentido.
Here we go. Here we
Eu
are.
mandei uma chamada para
Que
ele.
Aí estamos. Aí está. Muito prazer. Tudo bem?
Muito prazer.
Muito
Professor,
obrigada.
então, a palavra está com o senhor agora. Fique à vontade,
Obrigado.
viu?
Então, eu falo pouco português, mas posso falar inglês. Acho que seria, não sei se seria melhor, mas vou falar inglês, que tem uma apresentação aqui, está feita em inglês. A
Sim,
ideia.
inglês,
Uhum,
pode ser
tá.
em inglês.
Então. So let's continue in English. My presentation here is for sharing with you how I approach the development of the first AI pedagogic approach, first pedagogic approach to AI in music. I've been researching a lot in how to frame this presentation, being this responsibility of creating these offerings, these courses for Berklee College of Music. So I tried to organize it basing on many ideas and concepts I've been developing during more than 30 years being a professional musician and also an engineer, and having my PhD research on the applications of AI in music education. So putting that all together is what I'm going to try to bring here and share with you today. Basically, I started from the idea that that the AI in music. I'm going to talk about specifically in music. This can be extrapolated to other arts expressions, but I'm going to focus on music. That is my specialty. And first is that the from December 2023, everything is generative AI. And as you know, we've been dealing and being exposed to this type of models for many years before that, and they were not specific generative models. They were intended for different applications: prediction, classification, description, type of tasks on which they were applied. The second main pillar of my approach is to put these technologies, these models, and to see how the community, the music community, could at the same time get to know as much as possible the details of the technology, where to use it, how to use it, and specifically to evaluate its usefulness, its utility for being incorporated or not into their bag of tools, into their workflows. That was very important, connected to all of the fear that was present in the community when all of these generative AI tools showed up. And third is that I also analyzed in detail what I call the levels of control in the creative process, connected to different variables, to different type of models, and how much control the artist has over their creation. And everything was categorized in a precise way, in a taxonomy that I call levels of control in music production and creation. So, well, I have here a presentation. Professor Marcus, if you agree with me, I can present that, and then we can debate. We can have a
Of course.
Yes?
Yeah, please do it. Do you want to share your screen?
Yes, I will. Here, share
Deixa
my
eu
screen.
pedir uma gentileza. Estou recebendo aqui uma mensagem que, para o professor
Sim.
Carlos compartilhar e a tradução acontecer, é preciso trocar no próprio Zoom para o idioma português. Quem
Eu
tiver
preciso fazer isso?
isso, veja em qual canal que
Oh,
está.
Deus sei. Eu tenho que trocar de here.
Senão, vou pedir aqui para o Diego, que está aqui no backstage, entrar e fazer a orientação para que a gente possa compartilhar da maneira correta.
Mas você disse que eu tenho que fazer para a minha apresentação. Agora que vou, a minha apresentação está em
Não,
inglês.
pode
Tá.
compartilhar, vamos ver como que o pessoal da audiência
Okay.
está.
So here you go, and this is the presentation. Okay. Você me diz, Karen, se tenho que fazer algo diferente. Estão vendo?
Acho que está tudo certo. Acho que está. É que o pessoal que está no canal, no YouTube, no canal de tradução, não está ouvindo a tradução por lá. Então, quem tiver aí no backstage, peço para fazer os procedimentos, o professor pode seguir.
Perfeito.
Tudo certo.
Aqui tá bom. So, here's my. So all of this was done under the working with the developed team of this College of Music. This being in the forefront of music education for many decades now, Berklee College of Music. So we started with a 4-week course. Then I just finished developing the 12-week course, the continuation. I also have a Coursera. Yep, and this is I'm writing this. So all of this is this is very, very pioneer in terms of how to introduce, teach, and communicate the tools, the advantages, the disadvantages of these technologies applied to music. So let's do here. I have prepared a quick recap on the basics of this paradigm, focusing on those three particular dimensions that I mentioned before. For instance, the application of AI in music, it can be found on any of these stages that compose what we call the music work life cycle. For having a final listener hearing and enjoying our music, we start from the composition, then we have to play it, to record it, mix it, mastering, then distribute by different channels of distribution. Today, mostly by streaming platforms, and then be consumed, being listened, being enjoyed by the final users. So on every of these stages of the music work life cycle, you can find AI developments. Okay, so first of all, this was important to present, to state, for the community to have a sense of how this technology is incorporated in all of the possible stages, and to get to know this, and also obviously, after getting to know, after evaluating, after analyzing it, to take advantage of this technology. Yeah, and this is the other main paradigm I designed, or I'm based on. First of all, we need to define which task of all of these that I have mentioned, of all of these with tasks, and also you have subtasks into each one of these, which task are you going to approach? Then we see the technology. It's very important to understand the AI technology using to aid, or to automatize, or to enhance this task. Then we see the app, which commercial app based on this technology is used for working on this task. And after knowing the technology used, after knowing the application that used that technology for this task, we evaluate them from an artistic, musical, technical perspective, precisely focusing on all the evaluation criteria developed through centuries of music creation and performance. Okay, so this was the pedagogical approach I used. So let's see another how I framed it, and how this was put in action. So this is the mainly distribution of the course. Understanding music. First of all, we need to understand how a computer understands music. Is super important to distinguish between the representations. This is the audio representation. This is related to the physical phenomenon, to the sound phenomenon. Yeah, and then we have another type of representations that are more associated with the symbolic. This is kind of connected with what Professor Baramoin was referring before about the symbolic, the signs that we use here. This is the physical phenomenon. This is the symbols we've been using in music theory and composition. It's going to be very important to distinguish this. This is part of understanding the technology. If a model works with audio representation, yeah, if it works with the audio track, yeah, with the sound phenomenon, or if it's working with a symbolic representation of that sound. if it's working with clefs, note duration, silences, okay, key signatures. It's going to be a symbolic representation. That is going to be very different. Then we consider this discipline that has been with us for many years. This is music information retrieval. This is the analog of data mining or knowledge discovery, but in music. Okay, this technology, it's been with us for a couple of decades. It uses to work with signal processing, more physical kind of approach, and now we are using in this discipline a more modern machine learning or deep learning data-based approach. Yeah, I explained to them the basics of machine learning, of deep learning. Yeah, for instance, how to recognize the tempo of a song starting from an audio track. Okay, I explained them the complexity of doing this, because you have to convert the waveform that is a graphic into its pixels component, and then try to predict which is the tempo. This is the tempo of a song expressed in beats per minute. I explained to them the basics of machine learning, as you can see here, deep learning in this case, because we are dealing with graphics, tempo detection, and then we, as soon as we understand the technology, this is the task, tempo and beat detection. This is the technology used, and then we go to the apps, okay? And we try to analyze the performance. This is the task, core recognition. We understand the technology, yeah, using these templates of core recognition, and this is the task. We understand the technology involved here. Yeah, we go to the apps, and then we analyze, we evaluate using concepts that we know about music technology. In this case, mixing and mastering and effects and type of issues found in recorded music. So, for instance, when you try to separate between sources, there's typical issues are bleeding. Traces of one instrument appear in the other. When you try to separate the piano from a guitar, there are remainings of the guitar into the piano track, because the idea is to separate from a mix the different instruments. There are loss of fidelity. There are artifacts, these strange noises. So here I have present the pedagogical approach. The task is, for instance, source separation, to isolate the original instruments and vocals from a song. The technology used is source separation. We use some signal processing techniques, some modern machine learning and deep learning approaches. We use commercial applications as the ones that I showed, Moises, Lalai, etc. And then we evaluate it using concepts that we already know. We already know about masking of sounds. We already know about presence of sound artifacts in recordings. So we use what we already know to check the performance of the commercial application, and we try to relate what with the evaluation of the performance of the app with the technology that is backing that is behind the scenes of the app to automatize or to enhance this task, that is to separate, in this case, to separate the instruments and the vocals from a recording. Yep. Let me know if everything is fine until here. That translation, it's been solved. You want me to continue?
Tudo certo, pode prosseguir.
Beleza, continua. Então, valeu. Então, this is the second, I can say, the second pillar of my approach. First of all, considering all of the stages involved in the creation and the production of a musical work that I call the musical work life cycle, and seeing all the possible tasks on which we can see the applications of AI, and approaching those applications of AI in music creation and production through this pedagogical approach. The task, the technology used, the application, commercial applications, and how to evaluate them, which is the main purpose of this knowledge that we gained here, composed by these particular steps of this approach, is that the student, the user, the musician, in this case, musician, artist, educator, producer, sound artist, will be able to determine if this task backed by this technology using this application will be beneficial for their product, for their creative and artistic production, if it's worth to incorporate it or not into their workflow, into their bag of tools. So the main, so two objectives here fulfilled. AI in music is not just generative AI. Yeah, AI in music can be applied on many stages, on many processes that you, as an artist, as a musician, are usually utilizing, many of the or taking care of, because we as musicians and composers and artists, we deal with the recording, with the mixing, the mastering, okay, even the distribution afterwards to get known our work. So I was very happy to be able to formalize these two main, how can I say, these two main distinctions, that AI is used on many aspects of the music creation and production life cycle, and then determining a precise process and approach to evaluate the utility or not of these tools, understanding what's going behind the scenes, and the theoretical side of things, and also very precisely the applications and how to evaluate them using criteria pre-AI, because we have already developed this evaluation criteria before the launching of these AI tools. We know what is an artifact. We know what is musical. We know what sounds good. We know what are a coherent way to accompany a melody. We know how chord changes sounds with that has a flow, a cadence. Yeah, we know if a melody has the correct motivical development. We know all of that before AI, and we apply that criteria to evaluate the usefulness or not, yeah, of the application of AI. Let's continue. Here I explain the processing. This is mixing and mastering. We are in the middle of the music work life cycle. Here we analyze how to use AI tools for mixing and mastering. For the mixing process, first we start with effects. Here are all the possible processing that we usually apply to a raw recording: balance, stereo positioning, equalization, compression, expanders, reverb, distortion. And all of this is done with what we call an adaptive digital audio effects AI-based processor. Yeah, this is based on constraints and rules. We evaluate all of this. We unveil the mystery of all this AI-based technology used for effects processing and mixing. Then we also work with multi-track mixing. We have all of the different tracks of the recording, all of the instruments. Yep. And we see how this process based on AI perform this task of multi-track mixing. Then we move to this other stage of processing called mastering. This when we prepare the mix, the already created mix here, prepare the sound characteristics to the standards used in today in music in streaming platforms and social media platforms. In the past is where we prepare the sound, for instance, for being to follow the standards of a CD or of a cassette or of a vinyl type of discs. Okay, here we prepare the sound for being distributed, okay, to the public. And here I also formalize the way of applying these tools into processing into 3 different levels of control here. Yeah, this is a development. It took it was a research in organizing the features offered by these AI tools into these 3 different distinctions. In sighted control, the AI acts as an assistant to the user, providing deeper insights and augmenting the human decision process. This level is characterized by advanced visualization tools, informative feedback, and even haptic interfaces. For instance, here I'm seeing a spectrogram that is used by mixing engineers, but instead of being in 2 dimensions, it's in 3 dimensions. So it's expanding, it's augmenting the human decision. The human decision making process, as it says here. The second level of control is suggestive. At this level, the AI takes a more active role by offering specific recommendations. Here you have in this interface, the AI recognizes that this is a bass. This is done here in what we call a DAW. Here you have the bass of the song in this track, okay? And I have added what we call a plugin here. This is a neutron element. The plugin, as you're seeing here, has already recognized that this is a bass. Actually, this is a bass track. It recognizes to be a bass, and it's offering 3 different types of possibilities of applying effects to this bass track, and it's suggesting these 3 types of processing. So it's delivering me a solution, but it's suggesting me. It's not just the final product. It's giving me suggestions. So yes, you have these 3 to choose from. So at some point it's giving you a certain amount of control. Here you have all the control, but you have more insights. You have more visualization, more tools for you to take the creative decision. In this case, it's giving you a more finalized solution, but with different options for you to choose from and to decide which one you will choose according to your taste, to your experience, to your creative design. And finally, you have the last one, is where you don't have any control because all of it's done by the AI. The AI it's only able to give you, or it only gives you, one final solution. Everything is done for you. You just have to say thank you and deliver and use that delivered solution that the AI is providing. Yeah, that unique, that only solution. So the AI is doing everything here. Yeah, this is called independent or automatic control. Okay, any of these 2 can give you what they call a supervisory role giving you features for being able to calibrate and to personalize what the AI is providing, but it depends on the application. Okay, so here again, we will. This is what I consider to be my third pillar of how to approach AI tools in music production and creation, being aware of which is the level of control that you want to have into the final creative asset or creative work. Yeah. And then we go finally to the what we consider to be the most creative aspect of music production, that is composing, composition. Here I explain, I present here the complexity that music creation has, for instance, compared to text creation. This is music is a multi-dimensional, temporal content, yeah, because it's not just one dimension as text. Here we have at least 3 dimensions, because we have melody, harmony, and rhythm, and then you can add different type of possible dimensions to it. That is the arrangement, the instrumentation, the movements in classical music, for instance. So the complexity increases at some point in an exponential way. So composition is a very complex task. Here I present them the initial approaches to what it's been called computer music, and in the specific task of composition was called algorithmic composition, using, for instance, Markov chains, modules here, generative grammars. There also include genetic type of algorithms that emulate the natural selection process, but instead of natural environmental constraints, as in Darwinian selection. Here we have specific music theory and good practices in music theory and composition constraints that are genetic algorithms. So I explained that, and then we move to the modern approach that is called deep music generation. This is based on artificial neural networks, specifically deep learning ones, and started with recurrent neural networks, and then moved into transformers and diffusion models. And what is absolutely super important, and I go back to the first slides of my presentation, when we talk about symbolic and audio representations. When we work with symbolic, that in music is called MIDI, it's the most well-known symbolic representation. That MIDI is based on music theory. As you see here, the notes of the piano, each one has a correlative, a sequential number. These are called parametric models, that are more closely associated with the algorithm composition, as they have stronger root in music theory, okay? Meaning their parameters are stricter in a musical sense, as in this example. And the non-parametric models are based on a prompt, on a more generic, abstract, non-parametric instruction, yeah? Which after certain well-formulated, okay, here I explained that this is based, and these non-parametric models work with audio, okay? Works with the physical phenomenon. Instead of working with the musical theory symbols, it works with physical phenomena. This is a deep understanding of the technology that will be influential. These are the models, okay, but will be influential in the applications. Yeah, you will have applications based on on parametric type of models for composing. So remember the paradigm. The task is to compose. The technology, you have 2 different types of technologies for composing music with AI, the parametric and the non-parametric. The parametric ones, one example is this one, this application called AVA, and we analyze their results, yeah? And then I move into the non-parametric one, that are based on large language models. I explained the embedding space. I explained how these models are trained based on text prompts. Yeah, I made a super important effort on trying to explain the complexity of these types of deep learning architectures used for non-parametric music generation. And I even go with examples, as you can see here, using our beloved Caetano Veloso example, okay, with how to connect the text, the metadata found in all of these possible sources to connect to the song Odara by Caetano Veloso, using all of the possible metadata found there from the credits and the metadata from Spotify, going to YouTube comments, to Wikipedia, to the song and chords, specialized places, Cifra Club, and even going to articles. Okay, so connecting all of that text to the audio, and then being able to generate a model that are the most famous one, that's called text to music, being these two apps. The most famous one actually today turned to be the most used. Maybe you know, these models were trained with millions of songs scraped from YouTube and Spotify actually. This turned to be a super well-known lawsuit that was where the major record labels and the Recording Industry Association of the United States sued these companies for using all of their song catalog without their consent, okay, or without their licensing, without the licensing permission, and started a super complex legal debate that deals with the justification of using all of these 70 million songs for training these text-to-music models to be considered fair use, to be under the umbrella of the fair use law, or the fair use feature of the copyright law that allow researchers and educators to use copyrighted material for those specific purpose, academic research or educational purposes. Are two of the most important usages considered fair use. So there's a super important debate about this now, and that connects to my last development, that is levels of control. Here we call it levels of creative control, being super precise that we are talking about creative control. The parametric models, so you have this balance situation, this trade-off, that is the final conclusion about the pros and cons of each of these technologies, that can be also connected with the ethical and legal side of their development, as I have just mentioned. The parametric ones that are based on music theory and that are trained with MIDI songs. Usually MIDI songs are very scarce. They are very little amount of songs where you have the MIDI version, so there's no problems with copyright here and all those legal aspects. And you have a lot of user control. You are able to control all. You have almost full control of everything, because you can edit everything from the style of music to the length of the song to the form, to the parts of the song, until going to each of the notes, to edit each of the notes of the melody or of the harmony. But the audio quality is very bad. The output is, we call it, it sounds super synthetic. It's not a pleasant experience to hear a MIDI file. Sounds super mechanical, robotic. But non-parametric songs trained with 70 million songs on which we connect all of the available text to that of that song with the audio file, and we work with audio representations. Yeah, we work with the raw master track. We have very less control. We are not able to modify almost nothing. Yeah, but the audio quality is super. We have studio quality output. Yeah, so here is the debate. Yeah, so the user, we have a trade-off between how much control we can have and the audio quality that we obtain here. Yeah. So well, here also I organize what I consider to be the ethics and legal aspects of things in music creation. Yeah. Related to the input of the model, if there's is a consent from the authors, if there's a license legal process with the administrators of the copyright of the songs. These are called publishing corporations, and you have association that also collects the copyright from from different platforms and radios and TVs. So for training a Gen AI music models, we need to have consent and licensing. One open question. When we have the output generated, who is going to be the owner? Who's going to be the composer? We have the composers use of all of the songs used for generating the output. Imagine that you have 70 million songs. Imagine the amount of composers. So is this a creative work? This can be considered a creative work that is worth to be protected by the copyright law that retribute the creator, the author of this creative work with a compensation, that we call the royalties. If yes, who is the owner? If no, who receives the royalties? So we have to debate about a criteria for determining which is the percentage, if this is creative or not, and depending on that percentage, how we will distribute the royalties generated by the exposition of this creative work to the public. When you expose it to the public, the law says that there's a need to retribute the author with royalties according to the copyright law. So that's all of the dilemmas and aspect to consider. And then there's another one, is that the listener I consider that they have the right to know if a song was generated by AI or by a human, or if it was generated by a conjunction, a society of human and AI. Need to know in which percentage of each one of the partners. Yep. So this is what I prepare for you. I try to summarize it as much as I can. There's been a lot of research and development. Actually, my courses are live. They've been going live for more than 1 year. Have a lot of feedback and experience in how this was received. Well, I'm very happy, proud, and continuing my exploration and the development of new academic and pedagogical offerings. So this is what I prepared for you, and I'm very honored to be part of this Congress. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks a lot, Professor Carlos. Now we'll move to questions. I have a couple of questions I would like to ask you, but I'm going to give preference to the questions of the audience before, and then if there's time, I'll ask my own questions. And I would like to know do you mind having questions in Portuguese, or do you want me to translate?
No. Oh,
you feel free to answer in English, nevertheless,
okay.
but
Okay,
but there are
I
some.
completely understand Portuguese. I can also receive the questions in Portuguese, and I can also answer them. But I believe if they are
Okay.
not Portuguese speaking audience, yeah.
So the first question is from Guilherme Maximiano,
Mhm.
and he's asking como o professor Arana vê as possibilidades da improvisação musical entre humanos e IA atuando em performances conjuntas.
I think that that's a fantastic contribution that Guilherme is bringing here, because that's one of the aspects of the application of AI in music that I consider to be less explored, and at the same time to have a huge potential. Yeah. So because it will enable to have so much real creative freedom, because the improvisation, as we know, it's also called spontaneous composition. Okay, this was perfectionized. It was exploded to an extreme by jazz music. Okay, but I believe that in real-time interaction between an AI tool and human performers is not that developed. I can recommend to Guilherme and the audience to follow what's the keyboard player for Dream Theater, that is a heavy metal fusion band. Dream Theater, he's called Jordan Rudess. I will write it here in the chat. He's been developing with the MIT Media Lab a work on this particular aspect of the application of AI in the performing side of things. Yeah, he's doing a lot of work in this with very interesting results. There's also been a researcher, François Pachet, maybe some of you know him. François Pachet, he developed many years ago a model called Flow Machine with the same intention to interact in improvisation, to work like a kind of question and answer partner, yeah, to create melodies and interactions and chords, answering and interacting with a human player. Yeah. So well, I believe it's both an excellent application, and that it has a lot of potential in the future.
Professor Carlos, agora a pergunta do Marcelo Ferreira de Menezes. Ele perguntou o seguinte: como o professor enxerga fenômenos como o The Velvet Sundown, que alcançou sucesso significativo em plataformas de streaming como o Spotify, acumulando mais de 1 milhão de ouvintes mensais?
Muito bom. Excelente. I answered in Portuguese and then in Spanish, so I'm going to continue in English. My brain. Here's the thing. That is the third part of that diagram I showed you with the ethics and legal aspects. So there's a need to platforms to indicate if an artist, a musical work, it's human or it's AI created. I endorse that. Yeah, I believe that it's a right that we have as listeners, as users, as consumers, to know which is the origin. Okay, and if we have the right to know the origin, maybe from the country of manufacturing, imagine knowing if an art piece of work was created by a human or not. I believe that we have a super right to know. Yeah, it's determinant. Yeah. So first of all, that's the first part of my answer. Connected to, so if I know that Velvet Sundown was created by AI, I would have the option to hear it as a curiosity, to see if I get connected to it. I have I can take the decision. I don't like to be treated like that way of not informing me. Second, that amount of place, I cannot only connect it to the quality at all. It's been such a hype on that. We've been hearing about that on every music portal, magazine, website. So there was an intense curiosity to know what was going on. So that inflated in an exponential way the amount of plays of that song. For sure, there might be now many of AI generated songs and artists that we do not have a minimum knowledge or understanding, because the only one that got famous was Velvet Sundown, because of all of this hype that this bubble that they generated. So but at the same time, I believe that we have to consider as a community to be clear about our principles, to be clear about what we consider to be fair, to be legal, okay, in order to organize how these AI-based compositions will be distributed and delivered to the consumers, to the users and the listeners.
Now, the next question is by Paulo Silvestre. He is asking you the following, but the essential question remain: can AI be effectively creative? And I would like to expand that a little bit, because that was
Yes.
one of the things that I was going to ask you as well. You mentioned the problem of creativity in relation to copyright, but I think it would be interesting to hear from you how to address it from a more conceptual framework, starting with how you define creativity. And from that, based on what you consider to be creativity, if AI can be effective, creative or not.
Yeah, super interesting. I believe that is a key point here. I will first start with my definition of art, because you can be creative in developing these AirPods, and it's going to be an engineering creativity, or maybe a industrial design creativity on how, but maybe to create the electronic connections, you can be creative in the way of doing that. Okay, so, but I know we are talking about art here, specifically music. So I have my definition of art that per se involve at least two human beings: the artist and the audience, the listener, the people enjoying or admiring and experiencing that art. And for me, for being a artwork, it needs to be conveying and transmitting emotions from the artist to the receiver of that piece of art. If not, it's going to be a work of engineer. It's going to be something with a specific use, or with a specific purpose of, or maybe a scientific work that the purpose is to expand the frontier of knowledge, or maybe it's an engineering work where you have to make something more useful. Okay, but here you have to transmit an emotion. That's the definition of art. It doesn't have a utility purpose, but to exaltate, to generate this emotional connection between the artist and the receiver and the people enjoying, experiencing that artistic work. Starting from that, art, creativity needs to be transmitting that emotion in a way that is personal to that artist, that define in some way that artist, that makes that transmission unique in one way. And then we develop as a society the ways to evaluate if it's plagiarism or not. Okay, we have developed in technical ways how to define that. But that for me is creativity, to be innovative in the way of transmitting that emotions. Yeah, to be, I would say, creative. Okay, so that at some point is to be, to have a personality, to have a uniqueness in the way you are transmitting that. And by that definition, yeah, a machine cannot be a creator. Okay. But the methodology used by creators to develop something that can be a musical work that contains this, or that can be defined as a creative work, yeah, because it's transmitting emotions in a unique and personal way. The methodology used by us as creators, it's somehow analog to how these modern machine learning, deep learning models work, because they take experience of songs as we have experience in hearing and transcribing and playing tons of songs as musicians, composers, artists, and then applying some techniques or ways to taking that as a base to imprint our own personality to it. Yeah, modifying them or creating new ones different from that. Okay, but at some point, the methodology used by these apps in the technical side of things, yeah, it's analog, because it takes all that amount of experience from all the songs used in the training data set. It then can apply music theory rules for the length, for the key, for the tempo, for the instrumentation, yeah, that are compositional techniques, yeah, and it can deliver something that can be based on that. Then we can talk about the possibility of plagiarism or not. That is a very complex technological thing. That's why in my courses I teach a lot of technology, deep learning technology, for understanding the possibility of imitating a song directly or not. And it can deliver something that can follow the same methodology, or a methodology that is very analog to the way, I can say, a professional composer follows. Yeah, but it will never have that the process that we have as human composers, that all of that is influenced by actual emotions, by actual needs that the composer has, that will not only rely on all the music that we've heard and with the techniques and methodologies of human theory and composition techniques. It will have that add-on, that new ingredient that is only, and it will remain being only human. That is the necessity of transmitting emotions.
Okay, next question is by Alisson Teixeira. I will ask that in Portuguese because it's kind of tricky to translate. Como ficaria a questão dos direitos autorais e suas implicações financeiras no tocante à utilização de IAs para a composição musical? Quem seria considerado o autor da música?
Excellent. Alison, I'm very involved with what is happening in the US because it's where I work. The US Copyright Office started to they delivered a report on this. Actually 3 reports on the AI side of things, but one of it is considering the allowance to register or to protect an AI composed song under or inside the limits of the copyright law. So protected it and obviously then pay royalties for its exposure to the public. So what this report says is that an AI composition could not be considered under the copyright law. It will only be considered the human participation. So when composing a song using AI, there's like a honor code now, today, in the future. If we as a community decide to make these AI apps to indicate precisely which is the participation of humans and AI in the final song, until now, when you register a song, you need to indicate in which percentage was the human that took the creative, how much creative control the human composer has, and how which is the percentage that the AI was in charge of the composition. So if 50-50, you will receive, the only one that will receive a compensation, a royalty payment will be the human. Obviously, not the AI, not the developers, not the app owners or the AI models developers. So that's the first consideration. Então, depois, so that is the implications. Then, that's the answer for quem seria considerado o autor da música. The implications, the financial implications, is something that is so open now. The lawsuits that are connected to that, they are now running. They are at this moment they are happening. But for instance, it's been a week ago or 10 days ago, there's been an agreement between Audio, that is one of these apps, text-to-music apps. They made an agreement with Universal Music Group, UMG, to compensate all of the authors from that record label that also have a publishing company. All of the authors from their catalog will receive some compensation for using their songs in these models. And Audio will start only offering songs created by their platform that are trained on these licensed songs, for instance, from the UMG catalog. So that's the first approach in the compensation to composers side of things. Yeah. But it's very early. It's very primigene. It's very in the early stages of the approach to compensate. To the beginning of my exposition about the legal and ethical aspects. how composers will be recognized financially for their songs being used in training the models. Yeah.
Next question is somehow related
Ariane.
to that. So I think, yeah, Ariane, what is, in your opinion, a healthy usage of AI in the field of musical composition? And what are the limits between human authorship and AI authorship?
Yeah, that's why I'm developing that taxonomy of the suggestive, the insightful, yeah, and the automatic. There's a need to continue developing that in order to be clear about that percentage that we are talking about. Okay, that is going to be in charge of delimiting those limits that you're talking about between human authorship and AI ones. There's a work in progress. I'm super connected to that work in progress, and I believe that this kind of events, these congresses, this interaction that we are having with Ariane, with Alison, and all of you, it's super important to. I want to take and to share with you an anecdote. For these courses, we interview experts from the industry and from academia. No? And I interviewed the head of AI research and development from Sony International. He's in Tokyo. Yeah. And he told me something that really was a mind changer for me. He told me that when he's in charge of a lot of development. For instance, Sony is the manufacturer of the majority of photographic lenses used in the majority of cell phones. So all of the pictures that you see taken by a cell phone is done by a Sony camera. So imagine the amount of the knowledge about developing technology that they have. He told me something that was crucial and super interesting. He told me, we as technology developers, at some point, or at a very important point, we follow the community demands. We develop some stuff following scientific research, but these immense technology manufacturers, we are always looking on community demands. And for instance, he put me an example that was also incredible. He told me, imagine before online bank transactions, someone telling that there was going to be a possibility of putting transmitting your most delicate information, that is your bank information, and sharing that through the internet. It would have been impossible to consider without the demand of making the bank transactions more expeditive, more comprehensive at some way. So that was super clear, super interesting for me. If the community is demanding something, it's going to be technological actors that will be prone or will be interested in developing it. So connecting to this, if we are, as a community, we demand the developers of the technology to be super clear in which is the involvement of AI in music creation when you use one of these apps. There's going to be a legislation, and it's going to be a regulation that will oblige, that will enforce these app development companies to include that. So whenever a song is created by these apps, we'll have a watermark or a stamp saying this was created 80% by AI, 90%, 10%, 25%. So the new legislation is saying that it will only be protected the human percentage. So only that percentage. that the app is informing. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I think it should happen. Thank you for the question again.
Then there is Eduardo. He's asking, I think it's related to the Velvet Sundown debate that was happening before. Você vê necessidade desse aviso de uso de IA a partir de quanto? Entendo que a maior crítica é para 100% AI made. Mas e se você usar para fazer o beat ou um instrumento apenas?
Compreendo perfeitamente, está falando aqui, Eduardo. Então, the first approach, the first legal approach, at least in the US, and it's going to be the same in Europe, as far as I know, is and in Latin America, we have to also consider it, is that the amount is going to be determined by that percentage. If fazer o beat de uma música, of a song, it's in electronic music, it's going to be in EDM, it's going to be absolutely key. If it's the beat of an orchestra, it's not going to be that. Maybe it's not going to be that important. We will need to have we will need to agree in which will be the criteria for determining that percentage. That's why I encourage to participate, because this is so new that I encourage the music community to be asked to determine that. Because if it's not that done by us, as active participant of the artistic and the musical community, in my case, it's going to be done by bureaucrats or maybe computer scientists. With all the due respect for the two of them, I want that decision to be made by us, the community members of the musical community. Yeah, we need to determine which is the participation, the percentage of the drum beat on a specific style of music, and which is the percentage of, because that's the only way that we can separate and distinct between human and AI created music. You are right that the major critic is for 100% AI made music. That's why I developed that taxonomy of levels of control, being the independent or automatic one. Yeah, if you just click on a button, there's nothing for the majority of the creative community to be considered something creative. If you are just saying what you want, yeah, in a text, yeah. Yes, if it's 100%, I believe that there's no need to debate that much. Or maybe we as a community, we decide that saying what we want to have in words for creating art, it's a creative activity, or it's an artistic activity to say it in words. I believe that art it's emotion, but also it's craft, it's craftsmanship. You develop a vocabulary for transmitting that. We have a particular language. We have traditions that we like to respect or to transpose, to innovate. Okay, so there's each art has its own environment that also at some point define it. Okay, so there are many open debates that are here to consider. Fantastic.
If I'm not wrong, we don't have any more questions from the audience. Karen can help me with that, but I think there are not more questions from the audience. But I wanted to. Oh, no. There is one by Ana Cristina Lobo.
Sim, Ana Cristina.
Professor,
acho que
acredita
não,
que
Cristina.
caminhamos para perder a
Não.
função criativa e delegá-la à IA?
Completamente não. I think that na minha definição, in my definition of art, yeah, and creativity in arts, there's no possibility of delegating it, because I'm not going to be connected with something done by a machine. I need to connect to the artist for appreciating. I need to connect that what the artist is transmitting in their composition, in their lyrics, in their music, in their intensity, in their interpretation, is connected to their emotions. Is what connects to the audiences when you go to a live show. Okay, when you put a song, music is vivencia, is experience, are moments. You are recreating moments. You are recreating emotions. Yeah, it's not it's not rational. Yeah, so I believe that if we adhere, if we are clear of what we want in the arts, there's not going to be the possibility that these tools give us are fantastic to increment our creativeness, our possibilities. Yeah, we start talking about performance. For me, that would be fantastic to have to interact with an AI based improviser. The possibilities could be really much more or more rich, will be more surprising in many ways. Yeah, I, for instance, use these tools for doing crazy things. I compose a pop ballad, and I would love to hear it, how it sounds in samba canção from the 50s from Rio de Janeiro. I want to hear how it sounds, and these tools allow me to do that, or to hear 5 different accompaniments to this beautiful melody that I'm creating. I like this one, and I will put all my knowledge about harmony, put new inversions to it. So I believe the possibilities are many, but we need to have an agreement of what we want. You know, what do we want? We want to consider a piece of art, someone that writes something and the music is created, being this artist with non-control, non-artistic or creative control on what the app is delivering. We will consider that art. Is questions that we have to make. Yeah, and according to those answers, is that we will be able to determine how much AI is going to be involved or not.
Okay, I think now there are no more questions from the audience, but I wanted to ask you, I think we have time for maybe a last question.
Yeah.
And I would be curious to hear from you about the following. There are a lot of computational processes that used to be that happened even before the computer existed, if you think about it, you know. Or maybe combinatory processes in music and this sort of things, like John Cage compositions that are open and you can rearrange the parts of the composition. And I would be interested in hearing from you if you think that AI is optimizing already existing processes in musical composition, or does it create things that are completely new and it can only be made with AI?
Oh, okay. So if the computer is able to create something that is completely new that wasn't seen before
Yeah,
by
AI,
the
AI,
training.
not the computer, but AI in itself.
Uh, it's very difficult because if it's something that the AI model as we know them, they are all based on deep learning and machine learning, and they've been trained with a corpus of songs and okay. So you're asking me if these models could be able to do something that is completely out of those assets used for training it.
Yes, for example.
Yeah. There's something interesting, maybe that is super technological. I don't know if you, Professor Marcus, are, for instance, in the deep learning side of things of how these models work. There's a parameter called the temperature of the softmax, that is the last layer of the creative, that is in charge of being, at some point, is in charge of the creativity. I'm not going to use that delicate word. It's in charge of if the outcome is going to be expectable or not. Is something that is correct in terms of that is expected. That parameters goes from 0 to infinite. If it's 0, it's almost monotonous. It's going to be saying always the same word, the same note. That's 0. It's not going to be. It's completely monotonous. In 1, it's in the average. If you start increasing it, it's going to reformulate the information from the corpus to a point that at some point it's going to be unintelligible. It's going to be not understanding what is that. If it's text, it's going to be nonsense text. If it's music, it's going to be something that is not musical at all. Okay? But regulating that parameter, you can have levels of uniqueness, of innovation that are, in terms of generative theory, very interesting. I don't know if that is answering your question, because yeah, in probability-based models, everything is based on the corpus, Markov models, and that stuff. In generative grammars that are also compositional, algorithmic composition, we follow grammar rules, following a linguistic approach. In genetic, we have restrictions, so at some point we'll be following that restrictions. But in deep learning based models, there's a possibility of making something, but super unique. But what is going to happen is that the majority of the times will be nonsense, will be, in this case, non-musical, and if it's text, it's going to mean nothing. It's going to have no sense at all. Yeah. Is that close to the answer?
That's
Or you want to go deeper
thanks.
into some? We can go deeper into some point. I don't know if you have time to do
No,
it.
we still have 4 minutes, but actually, what I was interested in diving a little bit deeper is let me check here. You mentioned this deep learning architecture where there is the recurrent neural networks, variational, diffusion,
Yes.
etc. I was curious to learn a little bit more about the differences and the functioning of each of them.
Yeah. Recurrent neural networks are a type of deep learning architecture. They are neural networks that are specialized in sequential type of data. That was the first approach, also called autoregressive, because what you are modelizing is the probability of this next element knowing all of this. For instance, you have 8 words and you try to predict the 9th one. You have 8 notes from a melody and the model will try to predict the 9th one. So how do you train a model on that? You take a lot of melodies and you separate it in groups of 8 plus the 9th one. Then you slide 1 note and you take 8 and 1 and so forth, and you create a data set with groups of 8 nodes and the following one. So you train a model to be able to take 8 notes as an input and to estimate which will be the following one. That then turns very easily into a generative model. That was the beginning of generative models using recurrent neural networks. Then there are more modern type of models, for instance, variational autoencoders, and the last one's called transformers. Transformers is the T from GPT, from ChatGPT. Yeah, GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformers. So transformers are a type of recurrent neural network, trained to not work with just 8 previous elements from that language, can be words in text or notes in music, but it can take a lot more of context. Yeah, can take maybe thousands of of notes from a melody, or thousands of words. Okay, it can take a lot of context. It can take in music the context of the harmony, of the rhythm, of the melody. Transformers are recurrent neural networks that has what we call long-term dependency capabilities. Yeah, and for creating or for understanding the new element of a language according to what happened before, to the context, the way we talk, the way we write, the way we create music. It's super important to be able to consider what happened in the past, and with the most amount, with the biggest amount of information from that past. So that are maybe the differences between the models, is the ability to have a long-term dependency information, yeah, from the past. Yeah, so that's the difference.
Thanks a lot. Now I'm switching to Portuguese to close the session, ok?
You can, yeah, tudo bem.
Bom, gente, eu queria agradecer ao professor Carlos Arana, queria agradecer mais uma vez a Karen e a Dora e parabenizar pela organização do evento, né? A gente está chegando ao final dessa sessão e a programação continua hoje à tarde e amanhã ainda, então eu encorajo todos a consultar o site do evento, se informar a respeito do que está se passando, né? E a continuar acompanhando a programação aí, que está incrível, né? Tem uma série de coisas extremamente interessantes. E agora, pela manhã, a gente encerra por aqui. Então, não sei se o professor Carlos quer falar algumas últimas palavras aí, ou se a gente pode concluir.
Eu vou falar português. Estou super agradecido desse convite e compartilhar com todos vocês toda a minha pesquisa e todos os desenvolvimentos. Bom, muito agradecido, e que continuem esses tipos de propostas para nós conversar e compartilhar tudo que seja a aplicação da IA e os desenvolvimentos, especialmente na minha área, que é muito importante ter uma consciência e coincidência e trabalhar em conjunto. Muito obrigado.
Bem, muito obrigado. Então, encerramos, né?
Voltamos às
E
14 horas. Muito obrigada, professor Carlos, professor
Então,
Marcos, foi excelente. Muitos comentários aqui no chat. E a gente volta às 14 horas num outro link. Então acompanhem como o professor Marcos falou, o site do evento, porque por lá também, ao se credenciar, vocês podem garantir uma declaração de participação nesse congresso. Então, muito obrigada e até mais. Até à tarde.
obrigado a vocês.